booth when we get like 30 bags.
Yeah.
Like there's 10 of us and we each have like 3 bags.
I am
Yes.
back.
Vomiting, like just on his face like that. Everything like that.
Hi, I'm back. I hope everyone had a good break. I hope you're all doing well. Hope everybody's happy.
45 seconds to go.
Seems like love is in the air.
I'll never forget the Faircut trial. We came back from all there and nobody, plaintiff's side was there after lunch break and the judge came in. He was looking around. I was like,
I don't know, I gotta,
what kind of
I
case
gotta
sauntering in?
clean my apartment. I don't have time for that. I don't have time
This is
for love.
the opposite of one
Very
that's,
busy.
it's an invitation, not a summons. It's a summons.
I'm
not
just
an
very busy.
invitation.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Mandatory.
I want to make sure I get here when someone's here so I can tell you what's going to happen. Oh, wait, what's happening? Oh, hello. Where's the damn screen? Nope, that's not it. Sorry. Hold on. God damn it. I really hate this. Oh, okay. Is that it? No. Oh, I see. Hold on. Yeah, it's 1:15. Go figure. Go figure. It's 1:15. Where's everybody? What the hell?
It's certified.
Let's see.
You're late.
Looks like my diploma.
What certification is that? I think I've seen that
That's the
before.
secretary, sir.
Who is that
I
guy's
just was
voice? I
looking-
know he's
yeah.
Hey, Cash App. Welcome
That
back.
was,
Who
we
is that?
screwed
That
that
guy's
document
voice is
out
so
and
familiar. The
you're
defense
supposed to
attorney or the whatever attorney.
No, because I was,
Well,
I
this-
didn't
Plaintiff's
do a
attorney.
well on that case.
Plaintiff counsel.
Will now come to order.
Oh, all right.
All right. Thank you all. Please,
Coming back
please
to order.
remain seated.
Everybody sit down. Oh, wait.
Have a
Shit,
witness?
man. What the hell's going on with this fucking...
He's in the back.
May I?
Sure.
Okay, hold on. I've got some problems going on. Hold on just a minute. I got a
What do you
little
got?
technical
okay.
difficulty.
Great.
Oh, my God. Hold on.
Yeah.
All right, wait. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it, and you can hear one. All right, great. I don't know what I did. I don't know how this works.
And before we go back on the record, did y'all get a chance to talk about the other 7 or however many authentication experts or witnesses?
We did not.
Okay.
I never should talk about authentication.
Oh, That's pretty gold.
Oh, hi, Carla. No problem. Hey, Teresa.
We'll see where it takes
Thanks
us.
for
Okay, good deal. I just want to
listening.
continue to
Appreciate
flag that for everybody.
you. Happy to be a background.
And that may-
Always.
Got it.
And I have a memo
That's all,
on authentication.
Well, had it at me. No, I always do for a refresh. Yep.
Stay
I'm
black.
going to put on better captions.
All right. Do we have a witness?
He's coming.
Okay.
Oh, really? We don't have
Got
a
it.
witness because you guys are dumb? No, I'm just kidding. Can I get a witness? All right, well, we have their captions on the Zoom, so sorry about that.
All right. Come on
I
back,
can
sir.
probably make it a little bigger. Oh, you know what? Here, I know what to do. I know what to do. Oops, where am I? I'm on the wrong fucking screen.
All good? All right. Let's go
Oh,
back
here
on
we
the
go.
record. Sir, I remind you, you're under
Let's
oath.
do it.
Mr. Tyson.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, so I'd like to explore an area I think we can probably have some agreement on. I know you've worked in the security world for a long time, and Mr. McDougall had
This
asked
is
you
Clay
some
Parikh,
questions about is the
supposed
system
expert,
secure
not
or
an expert.
not.
Spoiler alert.
You'd
Hey,
agree that
Carrie. How are
security
ya?
is a matter of degree. Something's not secure or insecure. It's kind of more secure or less secure, right?
Correct.
And part of understanding the security of any particular system involves looking at some of the cybersecurity components, right?
Yes,
And it involves looking at the physical security of those components, right?
true.
And in determining how a system
looks
functions,
like a
you'd
dirty
agree that
kitten.
sometimes
I'm
usability for
sorry.
users can be kind of at war with security at some level, right?
In certain aspects, but in system design, if you create the system appropriately, usability is already taken into an account. So security never really hampers anything.
And part of the
Oh,
EAC's
contraire, mon
review
frere.
of a voting system includes its
I've
usability
worked
both
on
for
plenty of
voters and for
systems
poll
projects
workers,
where they
right?
interfere.
But we're talking about critical infrastructure. the thing that decides who you put in office, who you vote to protect you as sheriff, how you fund your parks. That's
You're gonna have
critical.
to split in
Those are high
about
value systems. You don't put
a little minute, but I'm gonna leave the
security in
stream
the
up,
back
so
end
just
of it
know
and say
that
that
I'm not gonna be on
usability is going to
screen,
be
but I will
paramount
be here.
over security.
Well, my question wasn't which was paramount, just that part of the EAC's review of a voting
And I'll
system
have it in my
includes its
ear, so
usability,
I
right?
may not be able to talk
The-
right
Any
away, but-
system that gets evaluated is usability, security, and all that. Not just in the technical world, in any process or procedure.
And there are some times where you may make a choice
guy's
that makes
ruining
a
my
system more
composition.
secure but less usable, right?
Yes, but what we're talking about as far as these systems doesn't make it less usable. I would care to sit down with any of the vendors and talk that technical conversation.
And so when we're talking about voting systems, just to come back to the main point, we're not talking about whether a system is, the Dominion system, for example, is secure or insecure. We're talking about if it's more secure or less secure, right?
No, it's not secure at all.
So in your view, it's not an issue of degrees of security as to the Dominion system. It is just straight up insecure.
Yes, as I've stated before, your home computer is more secure. But
You are
I don't know
full
about your
of
work. When as you're an
shit.
attorney, I often find that attorneys don't even use hard disk encryption on their laptops, which is another issue I have.
Go
But
fuck yourself.
that's a side
Go
note.
fuck yourself.
Please do it if you don't. Your
Go
clients will
fuck
appreciate it.
Your
So, but again, when we're looking at this, what methodology did you use to reach the conclusion that the Dominion system is insecure, not just less secure than you would like it?
The primary factor are the keys stored the way they are. Then within the operating system and the outdated applications, when I literally say there are hundreds of vulnerabilities, there are hundreds of vulnerabilities. And I've done this analysis on different machines. And for example, ESNS in my home state of Alabama, just between the operating system and the database server, 330 something vulnerabilities. And that's a conservative estimate. There's other things about your transport protocols, the SSL version being used, all those other things. There are literally hundreds of vulnerabilities.
Really?
And you'd agree there are many vulnerabilities from kind of any election system a jurisdiction chooses, right?
Right.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the data that you looked at. I just want to make sure I understand the pieces that you downloaded from the website from Voter GA. You mentioned those were SQL files. Was it just the databases or was it the entire election project that you downloaded?
They had other elements in it. They have ballot
It's
images
all
in it,
the
TIFF files,
same
and
people.
there are other components. There was the package info XML, which allows, because with the SHA file of that, I was able to check timestamps of the other files to know that they hadn't been tampered with. Because if the XML has not been tampered with, it had the timestamps of the files for some of the stuff. There are multiple things.
But the pieces that you were analyzing were only the databases, not those other components. Is that right?
I looked at them. I have analyzed the TIFF files because I've done calculations on how much it takes to transfer the image files and how some counties in Georgia don't do it to the next day, which is an improper procedure. It's
And your
different even
election
from what is called for by the
stop
vendor.
him.
And
Stop him.
so anyway,
Where are we?
the person who asked me about
What is
that,
going on?
I told them they were given inaccurate information, and I calculated everything out from the USB bus speed, which is the wires that allow the transfer, the type of compact flash, and I used the very lowest possible array. So I've looked at several things like that.
Okay, but for your testimony today, you're relying on your review of the databases, not those other components.
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned the hash values of those. Did the Dominion software generate a hash value for those databases that you relied on, or did the initial hash value come from somewhere else?
There are SHA files in those folders with the files.
And it's your understanding that those SHA hash files were generated by the election management system to travel along with the databases?
Yes, and your technical data package is reference to that. It's part of the system check that they do when they get it. So they ensure that, hey, this is coming from where I think it's from, and then they decrypt the file. Because on the compact in Georgia, since they're Dominion, they use compact flash. And on those tabulars, when the compact flash gets inserted, there's that check, and then it moves the files, and then it decrypts it. And that's how it knows it's legitimate. That's why if you have those keys, you can put illegitimate data in it to include ballot images, the CVR, and you can make it
Hey,
seem
Oren.
legitimate, and the system will take it as valid votes when it should not.
And so then before you did your analysis of the databases, you ran your own hash value and compared
Oren,
it to the
thank you
one that
so
was in the
much.
technical package. Is
GP
that
The
right?
very
and
first thing I do
Carla.
when I get files is
I
to
don't know
create
who
the
Andrea
hash.
is, but
Right.
welcome.
And those matched, right?
Grandma Evelyn
Yes.
and Gio's girl. This
Now,
is
you
so
mentioned too, I
cool.
believe, and I may not have
Thank
heard
you
this
so much,
right.
Oren.
You
You're so
loaded the
kind.
files into, I believe you said a Dominion
Oh, you a
system.
solid
Yes.
girl.
And what Dominion system was that?
That was from Mesa, Colorado.
Did you have access to the Dominion system from Coffee County, Georgia?
No, I did not.
And so you loaded the Georgia files
It is
into
a
the Mesa,
party.
Colorado file. Do you know what version of Dominion's
Thank you,
software is
Oren.
used in Mesa,
So
Colorado?
good. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Really appreciate
And what is
you.
it?
It's 5.10.
All the
But the
things.
SQL
All
server is the
things
same
everyone
version.
does. Sharing stuff is so important. It's just the way
And so the
things
demonstration you did
grow.
for the court earlier, you were in a Microsoft SQL suite of some sort to look at the
Studio
databases.
manager.
Studio Manager, thank you. But you performed your analysis in the Dominion system, or did you perform your analysis in the SQL system?
The SQL system is in the Dominion system. The Dominion system runs a SQL server, 2016. And in that server is where the databases get loaded in different areas, in
We might
different
have a little
states. You'll see
disruption in
old
the stream
databases,
because we
you'll
had
see
an
new
issue with our
databases. It all
internet,
depends on
but
how the county or
hopefully
state
we'll sail through it.
runs their elections and how they
Yeah,
preserve their
Smile
data.
Monday.
But just so we're clear for the record, in terms of your analysis, did you use the SQL database functions of the Dominion system from Mesa
Yes,
to conduct your analysis?
it's the same database server.
Thank
This is basic software deployment and development. It's version controlled. It's the same. The SQL server is the same.
Certainly. You also mentioned, I believe, in your testimony, you had some database experts who helped you. Who were those individuals?
I'm not going to disclose that.
Those individuals assisted you in your analysis of these databases in Georgia?
No, not the Georgia databases. It's this, but again, it's the same database structure, the same stored procedures.
And just so I'm clear, the individuals you referenced who were database experts who helped you were not involved in the review of the Georgia databases you're testifying about today?
That's correct.
Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about things you're not offering opinions about. I believe you said you're not a lawyer. You're not offering opinions on the legal compliance aspects of Georgia's voting system, right?
No,
And you're not offering opinions about the overall security of the system because you haven't looked at all the different components of how Georgia handles its election processes, right?
if the system itself is bad, and again, if you're relying on physical security, the other
they're not.
processes are irrelevant.
They're not. They're not relying on it.
So it's your belief then
Yeah,
that
why not
any other
disclose
element
them?
of the system does
Hmm,
not matter
let
from
me
a security
see.
perspective if
Could
the
it be that it's Corey
vulnerabilities you've
Surfer dude who
identified
leads back to
exist?
Mike Flynn?
I will
I don't
tell
know.
you, as I told a county commissioner in Colorado, when he told me all
Oh,
the
I don't
steps
want to
he
leave,
did,
but I really got.
and I
gotta
told
do some
him,
stuff, you guys.
you served your community well
Box of
because
facts.
everything he did, but then I put my hand on his shoulder and said, but all of it's irrelevant because the
Yeah.
system is flawed and has no security, no integrity whatsoever.
Was that also a Dominion system you were referring to?
Yes, it was.
And you did not offer an opinion at all about the degree of risk because you've concluded the system is just insecure, right?
That is correct. If you would like a risk analysis and assessment, I would be glad to do it for the whole
Oh,
state of Georgia.
Wait, so you
I would
didn't do
ask
it?
if you have the program. If you
Excuse
do
me?
not have a risk analysis assessment
Did you
program
not?
and
Did you
work,
not do
I can
that?
do it. I helped design the one that the Missile Defense Agency uses several years back,
How many years
and
back?
Health and Human Services as well.
What do you,
And
is
you
that a
don't have any
flex?
specialized knowledge or experience about the administration of elections separate from the voting systems. Is that right?
He doesn't even have it about the voting
The
system.
way the voting system test labs function is they set up the different scenarios, specifically if it's a state certification, which is different because Georgia did follow federal. So they run it through the whole gambit. So they have to set the components up in the different configurations that are listed in the technical data package. They run an election to include conduct an LNA test, and then they run sample ballots through, and
you-
like a regular election.
Hi, Neil.
And you participated in those processes?
Yeah, I've observed them, and in certain security functions, I would get to participate in them because we would look at things, especially when a vendor would try to connect something to the internet and have a firewall that would get inundated within a minute. But yes,
And it's
I
your understanding
can't.
the Georgia Dominion equipment is not connected to the internet, right?
that's incorrect.
So you believe Dominion voting system components in Georgia are connected?
From
to the internet?
unrelated Dominion documentation, I can specifically tell you that there is connection.
Which county in Georgia was there a connection to the internet of Dominion equipment?
It would be Gwinnett, if I'm remembering correctly. There were several states involved.
And which time period are you referring to?
This was 2020
Before or after the election?
during the election.
This has to stop.
And you've never
McAfee,
participated in the
what are you
training of
fucking- are
poll
you
workers
porn
for an
searching?
election,
What the fuck
right?
are you doing on that bench?
No, I've talked to them in my home state because the training's often
Okay,
done
I
by
really
the
have to
vendors, the
go and
majority, and
help,
they
but
ask
I'm
me
gonna be
questions
listening in my
because
ear.
they found flaws in the
So
systems.
I'm sorry in advance.
But you don't know who conducts poll worker training in Georgia, right?
No, not poll worker training in Georgia.
Now, I understand that you don't believe physical
This is so
security
good.
matters in this context.
I did not say it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'd say you cannot rely on it solely.
And you're aware that there are state election board rules regarding physical security, correct?
True. Again, bad guys don't follow rules.
Oh my God.
And do some of those rules
Shut
prohibit connecting
up,
Dominion equipment
sir.
to the internet?
I'm going to get away from using the term internet. I'm going to say network connectivity.
Oh my God, that's
I've
different.
noticed that
Okay,
many states
network connection
violate
is different
their
than
network
internet. I
connectivity.
don't
Their law
know.
says no network.
I don't know much about the internet.
Network connectivity anyway.
Is different.
Local area network still increases your attack vectors by
Oh,
1,000-fold.
My.
For example, the switches,
coming into my-
are they solely
Yeah.
for that?
No,
Or are
I'm
they
just
connected to
upset
any
about
other part of the county?
Oh,
It's
no, it's
been
fine.
the
It's fine.
case.
No, I'm gonna.
A lot
just
of counties
let
don't want to
it go.
provide that information. In Arizona,
Yeah.
they wouldn't provide that data. This is the digital evidence that would show that they have outbound connections and not necessarily the
Okay, I
internet.
just have to do that
You know,
there.
some people will say it's a secure VPN if you're in Wisconsin or Arizona, which is irrelevant because VPNs can be had as well.
It's good questioning.
So it's fair to say states have a variety of practices involving how they handle network connectivity.
Yes,
Do you know if the SEB rules in Georgia require secure physical storage of equipment?
yes, I believe they do.
And do you know if those rules require limited access of who can access the equipment?
I don't know all the details on that, but then again, any logging, access to those systems, any of the security seal tape logs, all that should be publicly available. For example, my company, when the federal government comes in and inspects us, there's an agency called DCSA, Defense Counterintelligence Service Agency. They come in and audit us. We provide everything to them, to include our corporate information, because it's in our corporate building. That's why they have authority over us. Why? Because we're in contract with the federal government. So every access log, everybody that badges in, and I work in a closed area, classified area, all that stuff's publicly available to them. And anyone, as far as the county, should be able to look at that. There's nothing classified about it.
And in preparing your testimony today, you didn't consider the SEB rules related to voting equipment. Is that correct?
Again, when you're talking about systems, that are this bad, it's a minor point on what the rules are.
So that would be a yes. You didn't consider that?
No.
Let me ask a couple questions about your illustrative examples that you played earlier. So the first one we talked about the password, and then you were able to decrypt and obtain the password using the decryption tool and show where the password was the same as it had previously been. Do you recall that?
The very first video was actually a hash of the DB Corp 08 exclamation point. Yes.
Yes, but that showed where the password was similar to what it had been in the past in other
It was the
contexts.
exact same thing. It's the same thing I saw in the labs back in 2008, 9, 10.
Do you know if the full database and those administrative account records exist on every component of the system or only on the EMS?
For the database server,
Yes.
there's an SQL lot database that goes onto the tabulators. I have not seen detailed system logs from the tabulators in Georgia, but I would find that they are not logging just like the EMS. But specifically, we were talking about the database that resides on the EMS. That's what those files. They were the normal election management database, not the SQL lot versions that run on the tabulators.
Right. And just so we're all clear on the different pieces, the part we were looking at on the videos was the election management server that stays at the county office, not the other components of the system that are distributed on election day, right?
That's correct. But with those keys, that's easily manipulated. Like I said, I can decrypt the configuration files. The tabulator will assume that they're legitimate, and then whatever configuration I put on the machine will run.
One of the other videos you showed a modification of votes that you did by running some script within the database. Do you recall
Yes.
that? And the manipulation that you showed there occurred in this example after the election was over, right?
That's because that's the way my demo went. This could easily be put on beforehand. And if you want to talk about beforehand, we could talk about supply chain management, and I could tell you some of the atrocious stuff I've seen, the technical data packages as far as where they get their parts.
But for the specific video you showed, in that situation, if that manipulation were to occur, we would still have the paper ballots to go back and could count those, correct?
Are you going to hand count the paper ballots? Because here's the thing that I've noticed. Even if like the state of Florida, which has, they say they do a hand count, but they use an automated system. It's another machine. Anybody that knows anything about system testing knows you will not use the same device or the same type of device. You will use a totally different method. And two, it's not independent because it has to use a ballot definition. So you've got your other third-party verifying app talking to the vendor. So it's not actually what we refer to as IVMV, independent verification and validation. So if you're not hand counting them, that's irrelevant. And I might add, I think there's a county in Georgia that's not obeying the court by providing the paper ballots to someone who requested them and won their case.
So just so I understand then, it's your view that hand counting of ballots is the only way to actually accurately tabulate an election?
That is not what I said.
Okay.
I said when you verify it, you do it by a separate method. If you're going to audit something and do that, that's the way you perform the test. And that's the way you can do it. I have personally went through hand counting class and observed it, and especially from my major in computer science is on system design. And so you look at system and processes, and I will state I'm pretty good at it because I do process improvement, and that's when I've gotten financial rewards from my companies. And what I would tell you as far as that is that in the process, it's got to be scalable, and you have to be able to adapt it because each county, just like each county in Georgia, is different. Telfair is a lot smaller than DeKalb or Fulton County, correct? Therefore, it'll be a different type of a method. The main thing you want is the process to be solid in its performance, to be auditable, and that's what can be done, and it can be done accurate. And the training I went through, we actually had a ballot with 25 races on it.
And you'd agree that using a risk limiting audit post-election is a good practice, right?
only if the risk limiting audit is a valid audit. And it does not. What I will tell you, in every state or county that I've evaluated the risk logic, the risk limiting audit, it's been ineffective. For a point of reference, St. Charles County, Missouri, stood there, they're a county official and everything. Oh, we're 100% correct on audit, 100%, just up, down. Sat down with pencil and paper, did the math. They did 0.004% of the votes cast in that. So what does that mean? I have a 99.996% of not getting caught. It's ineffective. You want your audit to be statistically significant to give you the comfort or trust that it's supposed to be. I have yet to see a risk limiting audit that does that.
So just so I understand then, it's your testimony that a risk limiting audit could be used to verify results of an election, but the ones you've seen, like used in Georgia, do not?
I would not use a risk limiting audit to verify. I would use a separate, totally different counting method, complete and in its entirety. Because my observations, and not necessarily in Georgia, but in other states, I've seen more things happen during primaries and local elections. And again, counties run the election.
Now, when you were at ProV&V, you conducted a security review of the Dominion 5.0 system, right?
Yes, I did several different vendors with them.
Do you recall if encryption keys were stored in clear text on that system?
From 2008 at Wiley Labs, where Jack Cobb, the owner of ProV&V, worked as the supervisor lead. I have not been able to do security testing to the realm that they should have been. So they were never, ever checked. Here's the thing, the labs probably never look at them. I stated the way I've stated before, I felt like I had a choker chain on me from day one in those labs. They do not test these systems to the appropriate level they should be. What they do is the lab will spend a week getting the big tabulators, like for ES&S, the 850, the DS 850, big monster machine that they have to spend a week to configure to get it to pass the certification test. Or you talk about the ICCs. The labs will spend more time getting them to pass certification on that portion than they do on security testing.
So your testimony then is, while you conducted some testing on the Dominion 5.0 system, you don't know if the encryption keys were stored in plain text because you never looked?
I would be allowed to have like 1, 2, maybe 3 tests, because you have to do up a test, right? In basic system development, you have use cases and your requirements, and that's how you develop the system. Then you go to testing. And in the test, there's a portion that would be security. And so I would write up my test cases. Here's the thing I would tell you. In earlier Dominion systems, like 4.14 or whatever, I've done several of them, I would do a test, it would fail. I would want to redo the test in the new version, and I would be told, no, you've already done it. And I'd say, but it failed. They go, no, do something different. Again, why I stopped. I got tired of the rubber stamping, and it was typical federal agency type stuff with the EAC. I just boom, boom, boom. No matter what I put in my internal security report to the lab, they always got certified, whether by a state secretary of state or by the EAC.
So it's not your testimony that the lab was doing something inconsistent with the EAC. It just wasn't doing as much as you thought needed to be done to test the security of the system, right?
I'm not good, well, because you'll pull me to hearsay. I would tell you that where states are supposed to be, just like in Georgia, where the Secretary of State has final say, even though it's supposed to be federally certified. When it came to the labs, they would say, well, it's got to go through a federal lab, so we got to do all the tests, but it's state certification, so we don't care. So are you going to allow that? I can tell you who said it and the multiple times he said it.
Now, you are aware that the federal CISA, a Center for, I can't remember all the acronyms.
CISA, yes, I'm
Yeah,
very
that-
familiar. I've talked to several of them. Southeast region.
So CISA is a federal agency involving infrastructure security. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah,
And you're aware they reviewed Dr. Halderman's report in the curling case, right?
yes,
And they issued recommendations around security practices for Dominion voting systems after reviewing that report, right?
yes.
And I think we said earlier, the encryption key issue was contained in Dr. Halderman's report, right?
What you're trying to infer is out of the 8 things that they listed were very limited in scope, didn't cover half of what Dr. Haldeman covered. What I will tell you is I know because I talked to the Southeast region, Georgia falls in the same area as Alabama. For many years, see, I attend forensic conferences, usually in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, because of the environment, right? Can't blame me. So as I attend that, they had one representative for a year. There are 3 gentlemen now that handle the Southeast region. So when you look at that, and CISA is also responsible for providing recommendations to industry within those regions, to the municipal governments, for example, city and county infrastructure. If you don't want, as Fulton County got hacked and everything went down, if you don't want that, you're supposed to consult with them. And some other people are pretty good. What I will tell you is their evaluation of Dr. Haldeman's report was probably very limited and very rushed to put something out to the public because his report was going to be public.
And so you'd agree with me then that the encryption key issues you're flagging in this case were not part of CISA's recommendations after reviewing Dr. Halderman's report, right?
He missed a lot of stuff.
But that CISA made no recommendations about encryption keys after reviewing Dr. Halderman's report, right?
That's true. It wasn't in the report.
I could have just a moment, Your Honor. Just a couple more questions. I asked you earlier about the 2024 election results, or whether people could trust those results. Is it your testimony that Georgia voters can't trust the results of the 2022 general election held in Georgia?
I would say yes.
Is it your testimony that Georgia voters can't trust the 2024 general primary results held in Georgia?
Considering the state of these systems, yes.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Hey, redirect.
If you could go to tab number 19. Turn to section 8. What is the title of section 8?
Give me just another second.
Yes, sir.
The title of Chapter 8 is Quality Assurance Requirements.
All right, sir, if you would please direct your attention to section 8.1.
Yes.
And that first paragraph, if you would please read to the court the first 2 sentences.
Quality assurance provides continuous confirmation that a voting system conforms with the guidelines and to the requirements of state and local jurisdictions. Quality assurance is a vendor function that is initiated prior to the system development and continues throughout the maintenance life cycle of the voting system.
And so that means while it's being used in elections.
When you talk about the maintenance life cycle of any system, that's from inception to death. So if you get a new system, you start tracking it, you analyze it, you maintain it, you record all those. We have a system that we use on our program that everything, when it comes in from procurement, it's in the system. There's change requests done on it. Everything that's done to that system is tracked until we decommission it.
All right, sir, you were asked questions about whether software updates would require a new certification. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Are you aware of whether the Dominion system has applied Windows security patches and updates since its deployment?
No, I'm not. I've seen a couple of them with ES&S, but that's something that doesn't go. To further this point, I have voiced my opinions to the lab when I was in them, that when you bring a new system in and you're going to get it certified for use and sell the product, you would agree that you would bring your best, that you would make sure everything functions, that we've tested internally and it's good. I've been in the lab, seen antivirus in the certification lab now, not even being used. So we're not even talking about having to update it yet. 2 years, definitions out of date. The version, the antivirus actual application, several years behind with multiple vulnerabilities in it. And this is just talking about the antivirus. And that's what was delivered in certification, let alone maintaining it. But as far as engineering change orders and normal patch management processes that the rest of their industries anywhere that deal with IT, no.
So to your knowledge, are security updates being applied to the Dominion systems used in Georgia?
No, they're not. I wouldn't see all the vulnerabilities I do. You can pull any test report from the EAC site. All you have to do, type in Google, CVE, and that software listing and the version number, and guarantee you'll find multiple vulnerabilities of high and critical.
Do you have any understanding of why the state of Georgia, or let me back it up. Do you have any understanding of why the systems in Georgia have not been updated with those security patches?
No, I do not.
From a security standpoint, how would you characterize that practice?
That's gross negligence.
You were asked a number of questions about the keys being different from one county to the next. Is that true with respect to the X509 certificates?
No, they're the same.
And they're not just the same from county to county, they're the same from state to state that you've examined?
Yes.
All right, and the same question for that vendor password, DVS Corp 08 exclamation point. Is that different for every county?
No.
Is that different from state to state?
No.
And how long has it been the same on all the Dominion systems?
I saw it in the test labs, and like it's documented by the EAC even as a deficiency, so it went forward formally in 2010, but I know I've seen it prior to that.
And the vendor password, if employed, gives a user what authority on the system?
Yes, they would have administrative access. Here's the thing, these systems are so horrible. I want any access to the system. There are so many vulnerabilities where you can escalate your privileges. So even the normal user who wouldn't have it as they're working can just exploit one component of that system, elevate their privileges, and then act like they're an admin.
Now, you talked about escalating privileges, elevating privileges. That sounds like an industry term. What does that mean, and how is that type of thing exploited if it is?
So in normal organizations, you're going to restrict users' access. We call them privileged users on the program I work at, and even those aren't admins. They get there's special access that you can have to run applications, because some applications require system level or what we refer to as root access. When those applications do, if they have a vulnerability and you're allowed to run them, you can exploit them, and you can raise from your limited access. For example, in the probate judge that allowed me to look at a system in Alabama, he got a little too afraid, wouldn't let me touch, but I had him log in, and his limited visibility, as we looked at the systems, and that's how I came to the 300 and something vulnerabilities, he could have easily, on just the access he had, manipulated, run a script that he copied down from Google or one of the hacking websites, ran it, and been elevated his privileges up and become admin and see things he couldn't normally see. For example, a lot of the vendors will not let you see that the wireless connection's on, and you won't be limited. You can't do that. On my program, because classified systems have to be up 24/7, normal users can't shut them down. When you go to hit the power down, shut down button, you're not authorized to do that. It tells you that. You give levels of access to what they're done.
In the configuration of these Georgia election systems that we've been discussing, are they robust to nation-state threats that are faced by the United States?
No, they are not.
And how would you characterize the level of capability of the adversary compared to the level of protection in these systems?
Considering nation states like China have buildings literally with people that probably made me look silly as far as my technical capabilities. It's a cakewalk. Again, I say someone of kitty scripter level 5 that watches a few YouTube videos and can understand the basics of a computer can manipulate these systems easily.
Now, you were asked a few questions about air gapping or internet connectivity, and then you express it in terms of network connectivity. Just to be clear, is the air gap that's touted in this system actually an air gap, and does it protect the system against penetration?
When there are different areas, and this is only an argument that depending on what state you're in, because how they define the system and the voting system. To me, as a security person, you have to look holistically. To me, as somebody who's hacked before, you look at the whole system, because there are things in the hacking world called pivot points. For example, if I can get in on the poll book, then that means I can get to the printer. If they have the ballot on demand printers like a lot of states do, I can manipulate that. I can insert a QR code on that could execute some malware on a tabulator. There are literally thousands of ways to do it. I see some states that actually violate their law because they say no capability, and yet the systems have capability. There's probably not an EMS out there that doesn't have a wireless or Bluetooth card on it. And I'm keeping it simple because you don't need those cards on there to manipulate and to establish a communication channel. Those are the primary ones that normal people understand.
Despite the air gapping.
Despite the air gap. And again, air gap systems can, and they'll use this term, it can include network connections. But the minute you have network connections, that you increase your attack vectors 1,000-fold. And what I will say is these air gap systems utilize compact flash, USBs, removable storage. I can tell you, I put files, they were harmless, but I put files on Dominion and ESNS systems, and they did not identify them.
Through the path of removable media?
Yes, on that, and on the systems to where they actually had the data encrypted as it should be. What I've noticed during forensic examinations is a lot of this election data is not encrypted. For example, I can't remember the Georgia County, but when they removed the compact flash or the USBs during the election and replaced them for some reason, that would leave that data that was currently on there in an unencrypted state. That does not happen until you close that tabulator, that you close the poll down on that tabulator.
And so the removable media, when they go in and out of the slots from one machine and one component of the system to another component of the system, that's mechanically bridging the air gap?
Yes, sir. And another thing is, as far as that is the election not reporting, right? When you've got your main reporting server, usually on an EMS, and it's air gapped, but yet if they reuse that, and that's where procedures come into play because some don't, if they reuse that USB and take it to the internet connected computer and transfer that data off to the other third-party private entities that really shouldn't be involved in elections, when that gets done and then they plug it back in, was there any virus? Oh, we're going to check with the 2-year-old virus definitions that have never been updated. And virus definitions are irrelevant to any good hacker anyway. But the thing is there's no check on the integrity of that USB, that compact flash that gets transferred back and forth.
Between an internet connected machine and
And
the server.
yes, sir.
So are we talking about a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible level terms of difficulty to get across the air gap?
No.
All right.
No.
Okay. To your understanding, is Dominion able to remotely connect to these election systems?
Yes.
Are they able to do that without detection?
Yes.
And are you aware of any instances in which that has occurred?
Yes.
Can you identify those instances?
One would be the Denver, Colorado server was granted, or requested to grant Belgrade, only Belgrade. I did search. There is a Belgrade, Montana. Again, why would Montana need to connect into a Colorado file transfer server as part of the election system? And there are other components and things that were done in the background concerning the database and the configure of the database server that still do not have an engineering change order. Because if somebody works in an operational environments for a lot of different things, what I will tell you is sometimes things break or you have a problem and you have to fix it. And you submit a change request, or in this case, an engineering change order that's retroactive, right? You want to go back and make sure that you record the process so that you have change management and integrity of the system. If you do not record changes, you lead yourself down a very bad road.
All right, sir. Does the storage and management of the encryption keys relate to or affect usability of the system?
To the user and the way the system functions, no.
All right.
Vote, if your question is, would voters be affected? Would county workers be affected? No, they would not. This, if I might state something on hard disk encryption, because I suggested that from 2008 on every year. I would listen to these software developers tell me how it was going to be a hit on performance on the election systems. These election systems are nothing but a database server that's taking in data and adding the data and printing reports. We run classified systems. Everything has disk encryption. And so I've dealt with that. Now, finally, once some videos have gotten out of how easily they are to get in, they're trying to implement changes like that. And so as far as those systems and the way they design it and the functionality of affecting the voter, no.
All right, sir.
It's underneath, it's behind the scenes.
Thank you. Now, the common vendor password that we've talked about, DVS Corp 08 exclamation point, does that relate to or affect the user experience, usability?
No.
You've stated your opinion a couple of times in response to my questions about whether the system complied with the VVSG guidelines. Was that a technical opinion or a legal opinion?
That was my technical professional opinion.
All right, sir.
Now, I do know enough about contract law that when certain sections say shall and you don't violate it. So if you shall do a requirement and you don't do the requirement, I don't see how that gets to be into a legal basis. You did not follow it. It's either a yes or a no. And the way I read it, it's binary.
All right, sir. Now, you mentioned that certain components of the system are connected to a local area network.
Yes, usually your ICCs are connected and they report back that way. And then you have what's called adjudication workstations. There's different levels. Each technical data package from the vendor, they'll give different designs. Again, because each county is different size, you may not need all the components of that system. So they provide different configurations, and each of those configurations are supposed to be tested.
And the X509 certificate that we've talked about, that's how one machine on a network knows to trust another machine on
Yes,
the network?
yes, sir.
And so the X509, the presence of that on the system is designed to enable network communication. Is that right?
Yes, if one of the users, yes.
All right, sir. Now, Professor Halderman's report, if you would please turn to tab 21. Tab 21.
Okay.
Does that report identify the system component that he was analyzing?
On the front cover page,
Yes, sir.
it says it's for Georgia, and it's the ImageCast, it's the ImageCast X ballot marking device.
And is that the election server or is it something else?
That's a ballot marking device. It's for accessibility for those with disabilities. And what you do is you mark your ballot on the screen, and then it prints a ballot, which I might add, and I will state this because I know the VVSG requirements. Title 3, Section 301, Paragraph A, the voter will verify in secret and confidentiality or something like that, their ballot is correct before they cast it. There is no human being that can read a barcode or a QR code and verify their vote. I dealt with a hearing in Pennsylvania where the printed text at the bottom, which is not evaluated by the system, was different than the barcodes. This were ES&S systems, and people complained, and they allowed it on a clerical error. The clerical error that the court dismissed everything on there is a technical flaw in the system that should be that. And to my professional opinion, based on what HAVA requirements are, that these systems, whether ES&S or that, if they use a barcode or a QR code, they're in violation of the HAVA.
All right, sir. Now, I would like for you to turn to page 48 of Exhibit 21, the Halderman report. And let me know when you're there. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
You see the indented line towards the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And what database, well, tell me what that is and what database is being queried.
And Your
That
Honor,
would-
I'll just object at this point. We don't have this in evidence. And so I think this is getting a little squirrely in terms of how we're handling this.
Do we do,
Want me to read it?
what's the ultimate point here if it's not for the truth of the matter?
And this is in rebuttal of questioning on cross that the database with the encryption keys vulnerability existed only on the server. And this report demonstrates otherwise, and I'm calling it to his attention.
And Your Honor, I'll just say that wasn't the testimony, I don't believe. I believe the testimony was there's a SQL-Lite database that's on the BMD versus the entire database.
But regardless, wouldn't that, you're now doing exactly what you said you would be unable to do, which is to say that whoever, wrote this report, you're now putting it in for the truth of what's in the report.
I'll ask him if he has independent knowledge. Do you have independent knowledge of whether the encryption keys are stored in plain text on the ballot marking device?
Yes, they're the secret private keys, and they're obviously, this is the same exact query.
And how do you know that they're, apart from Halderman's report, do you know that?
Because these Rondell encryption keys are symmetric. There's two different types of encryption. There's symmetric and asymmetric. And that's the reason they're a private key, and they're supposed to be stored securely, not in plain text, is because If you get the key, you now risk exposure. They're a lot faster to authenticate and they're used, but usually, and we'll talk server communications and authentication, you authenticate with asymmetric, right? Public-private certs. That's quicker. You get the connection, then you exchange the private key. And these are considered private keys and they're setting on the tabulators.
Do you
There's
know that-
ICX in this point.
Do you know that apart from the Halderman report?
Is actually having an ICX image myself? No,
So how do you know it?
because the queries here and the way the components are built and designed, they have to. It's just a technological piece of it.
In order for the ballot marking devices to work as a part of the,
How would the tabulator decrypt the DVD configuration files and operate if it couldn't decrypt the encryption?
and in
It's
order,
basics.
in order to do that, it has to have the same encryption keys,
Yes, because of the way this is. Yes.
and those encryption keys that were used to encrypt those files, that was done on a,
The same key and the same vector are on the tabulators, the other components.
you mentioned supply chain. Help the court to understand what the concept of supply chain vulnerability is.
Well, considering Lockheed Martin made me go through class on this, I'll try to keep it short for the court. But especially specifically in any major company where you're worried about, especially in the DoD environment, you're going to build a weapon system, an information system, whatever the case is, you want to know that from the concept of the products used to build your components is done in a secure manner. Because technology today, you can fit a microprocessor on the tip of your finger and barely be, it'll look like a speck of rice, even smaller. And these things are that. I know Northrop Grumman touts it on their website. And the thing with these type of things, it can be embedded. Years ago, there was a USB battery charger that they did not discover that China had malware on it until 10 years after the fact. It had already went off market before. So how many computer systems, how many people's systems were infected with that? And that's why you have to look at the products where they come from. It's called global supply chain. And you go through that management. And certain companies have the training, and it's so you ensure the products and the components that you use to assemble your system are secure.
And the system, the election systems that are used in Georgia, do you know anything about their supply chain? You mentioned it in response to Mr. Tyson's questions. What can you tell us about that?
I cannot speak I have not seen the 5.5A technical data package. I will tell you, I've seen several other technical data packages, and to that fact, some of these components that are in the newer versions are the same components that are in the older versions.
When you're talking
And-
about hardware components?
Yes, sir. And so because these tabulators are basically optical scanners with some other homegrown software thrown on them and other components, certain kind of little small printer to print reports and do the things it needs to do. You have to have separate in the bins. You're supposed to separate stuff that goes into the adjudication database to a different one and all that. So there's a lot of mechanical points. They build these things. I will say some of them are built poorly because they're supposed to run off backup battery in case you use power. As they found out in Arizona, you've got to plug them in 20 minutes before you can even power them back on or they'll start charging. That's poor system design. And so anyway, these components have to be listed in the technical data package. What I can tell you, I personally verified, is that there are same email addresses for components that go from different countries, and then there's bogus ones, and it's laughable at what they consider supply chain management as far as voting systems.
That's all the questions I have.
Any recross on those points, Mr.
Just
Tyson?
briefly, Your Honor, my best on this. I want to follow up on a few of Mr. McDougall's questions. First of all, as I understood your testimony, it's your belief that any ballot marking device system that's used for all voters that uses a barcode or a QR code either is or should be illegal. Is that right?
Yes,
And so there's no configuration of Georgia's Dominion system if it prints a QR code that you would consider to be compliant with existing law and structures involving voting systems, right?
as far as with the voter being able to independently verify.
Mr. McDougall asked you about applying system updates. Do you recall that?
Yes,
You would agree with me that Dr. Halderman covered system vulnerabilities in his report in the Curling trial, right? System update vulnerabilities.
yes,
And he also covered privilege escalation as part of his report.
yes,
And he also covered root access in his report.
yes,
He also covered nation state threats faced by the United States and states.
yes. As far as ease, I believe is the way you reference it. As far as ease of access, getting into the systems.
Mr. McDougall asked you about internet connectivity. You mentioned you put some files onto Dominion systems. Did I get that right?
Yes,
And you did that in your lab environment at the voting system test lab, right?
yes.
Mr. McDougall asked you about the air gap and moving election results from the EMS over to the election night reporting computer for each county. You have not reviewed the training that is provided to county election officials about how to do those uploads, right?
Specifically to Georgia, no.
You also mentioned Dominion remotely connecting to election systems, but you don't have any evidence that occurred in Georgia, correct?
There was one county. I've seen a lot of Dominion emails. I've had to translate Dominion emails from Serbian to English to verify the technical questions I was being asked about them, to verify that it was translated properly. So
it's your testimony that there is evidence of Dominion remotely accessing Georgia election equipment?
yes, on the one county, it was included with stuff that I was researching and reading through, considering Colorado. Michigan was also involved, and there were other ones.
And so I'm focused specifically on Georgia, and we're referencing the Gwinnett County 2020 incident. Is that what you're referring to?
I believe so. I have went through a lot of Dominion emails.
And ultimately, for all the different vulnerabilities we're talking about, someone has to gain access to the system in some way, right?
Yes, either locally or remotely.
And I believe earlier we covered that of all these different vulnerabilities, that every voting system has vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah, every system has vulnerabilities. The thing is these voting systems, irrespective of the vendor, have a ton more. I don't take that saying your home PC is more secure lightly. I'm a professional with over 20 years experience in this field. I've worked in every federal agency there is. I've been consulted by private companies. I've worked internationally for NATO, recovered NATO's infrastructure when it was being rebuilt and had an issue. So I do not state that lightly. These systems are horrible.
And you'd agree that ultimately each state has to decide which vulnerabilities it wants to encounter when it's choosing an election system, right?
That's basic risk management, and that resides even outside of technology areas. There's all kind of risk assessment and analysis, and there's risk. Even with anybody that deals with a contract knows this.
But ultimately, it's up to the state to make that selection of that voting system, right?
Yes.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. McDougall, can this witness be excused?
You may, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. Please step down. All right, you may call your next witness.
I call Ben Cotton to the stand.
You swear affirm that the testimony should give employed is to come and that the truth will help you. I do. Please state, spell, face, and last name for the board. My name is Benjamin, Benjamin, Cotton, Cotton.
All right, Mr. Cotton, where do you live?
I live in Big Fork, Montana.
How are you employed?
Well, until this last Friday, I was the Vice President for Incident Response for East Entire USA. I retired from that position. As you may be aware, incident response is a 24/7, 365 commitment, and my wife was diagnosed with a medical condition that requires someone to care for her.
So you mentioned incident response. What does that mean?
Incident response is the industry term for responding to a crisis in which a hacker has penetrated a network and is exploiting that network, whether it be for personal gain, monetary gain, or just kicks and giggles.
And so that's IRT. Is there something called HIRT?
The HIRT program, HIRT, stands for Hunting and Incident Response Team, and that is a subdivision of the CISA, DHS CISA agency. And yeah, I have supported that as an active member in the
And
past.
so the hunting part is what?
The hunting is actually looking for finding out who did the penetrations, looking for these breaches, and then trying to perform attribution to those intrusions.
Prior to your last employment, I can't remember the name or pronounce it correctly. What did you do?
So I basically got into computer forensics through the military. I'm a 21-year veteran of the military, of the Army. 19 years of that was spent within the Army Special Operations Command. The last 6 years of that was spent in support of a special mission unit as a fully qualified operator. As part of that military service, I got involved in what myself and two other people for that special mission unit termed digital media exploitation. And that is essentially exploiting devices that we found on the battlefield and turning that into actionable intelligence to feed the operations and intel cycle. Operations and intelligence cycle. In 2003, I retired.
From the military?
From the military, and I became a civilian contractor for the Drug Enforcement Agency as a senior forensic examiner in the digital forensics lab in Lorton, Virginia for the DEA. I subsequently moved or was asked to join an effort that performed the deep dive computer forensics for the high value terrorist target disk drives that were seized overseas as part of the CIA.
Was that for in connection with the Gulf War, or was it generally post 9/11 work?
That was post 9/11 work, basically from the beginning of 2004 through 2007. I was part of the team that did all those deep forensics
right,
examinations.
So then what? Take me up to
eCentire.
eCentire, thank you.
So eCentire, that's E, capital S, ENTIRE.
Take me up to them.
So I created a company called Cyber Technology Services. We did business as SciTech Services. We supported the intelligence community, other government agencies, both from analytic and digital forensic support through that time period. Additionally, when I retired from the military, I was hired by Guidance Software. They were subsequently acquired by OpenText. That's one word, OPENTEXT. And I was an instructor for the Encase forensic software. So I taught other experts how to use the Encase software.
And what is the Encase software?
The Encase software is a GUI-based analytical platform that will perform forensics imaging, and it will also conduct detailed analysis and allow the examiner to conduct detailed analysis of forensics images of digital media that is pertinent to law enforcement, intelligence, or whatever the issue may be.
That's a standard tool in the business.
It is.
All right, sir. So you formed this company called SciTech,
That's correct.
and did you remain at SciTech all the way till
eCentire?
eCentire?
No, I did not. So as part of the SciTech experience, we actually created our own digital forensics software designed for very large enterprises. And essentially, if you're familiar with computer forensics, then you've ran into a one examiner, one computer dynamic where it's very difficult to analyze and triage tens or hundreds of thousands of computers at once. Our software was created so that we could perform forensics analysis across hundreds of thousands of computers simultaneously and return results in the same amount of time as it would take to examine one computer. That software we spun out into its own company in 2018 called Cypher. That's CYFIR.
And what was your role in the development of the Cypher software?
It was my brainchild. And I also assisted in the development, the testing, and the full spectrum as CEO of that company.
And then from Cypher to eCentire.
So eCentire actually purchased Cypher in 2021, and they insisted that I come along as part of that deal.
All right, sir. Any notable achievements in the attribution of significant cyber
I know what I
penetrations
missed. I
or
was
hacks?
listening to it while I was cleaning.
Yes, so as part of a demonstration to the Office of Personnel Management in, I believe that was April of 2015, we
Oh, no,
discovered
this guy?
the Chinese
Oh,
breach
son of a bitch.
of OPM, which resulted in the largest breach in the history of the U.S. government. And that was attributed back to the Chinese.
And how long had that gone undetected, if you know?
Almost 3 years.
Do you hold any
This is
security
somebody Cotton
clearances?
or someone?
I do.
I
I
recognize that mug.
hold a top secret government security clearance.
Sure you do.
Have you
Hopefully
ever
not
had
for long.
higher levels of clearance than you do currently?
As needed per specific programs, I have been involved in multiple secret compartmentalized information or SCI programs.
All right, sir.
Hmm.
Any prizes or awards in your field?
Are you
Um,
outstanding in the field?
I don't remember the exact ones. We had multiple, best technology, leading technology,
I
that
know.
type of thing
And all of a sudden,
from different
dumb shit number 2 is here.
magazines and industry groups.
All right,
not
I believe
safe.
you've got a binder on the table there with you.
Do you have a
Yes.
binder full of women on the table?
If
in
you
front
would
of
please turn to tab number 22.
I'm there.
Can you, and you see a document there marked exhibit number 22. First page, lower right corner.
Yes, I see it.
I just got commented on by one of Doug Frank's former students. I don't believe it.
Can you tell the court what that is?
I'm
This
bookmarking
is
that. I
a
wanna talk to
copy
you,
of
Brian.
CV.
Tell us everything.
All right, sir. Now, I'll tender Exhibit 22 into evidence, Your Honor.
No objection.
All right, applicant's 22 is admitted without objection.
Yay, thanks, gal. I gotta look up this
We talked
douchebag.
about your background, qualifications, training, experience. Is anything else on the CV that you think is worth pointing out to the court?
Well, I do have a master's degree in
In bullshit, underwater basket weaving.
information systems management, and I hold a
Oh,
CISSP
You have a
certification as
master's
well.
in computers?
All right, any other
You have a
certifications?
master's in
I am
computers, sir?
certified
Do you?
investigator with
I don't
Cipher
believe you.
technology as
I
well.
don't
Right.
actually believe
And do
you.
the
I wanna see the
certifications that you
paper.
hold require ongoing training or updating or continuing education?
Yes.
And you
All
complete those
sweaty.
every year?
Yes,
Are you familiar with the election systems used in Georgia?
I am.
How are you familiar with it?
I was first asked to become familiar with them as a retained
By
expert
who? By who?
by Stephanie Lambert
Oh, fucking hell!
for her client, Misty Hampton in Coffee County.
Guess where
And,
else Stephanie Lambert is? About to be in
What
court
version
in Michigan.
of Dominion software is used in Georgia?
She's Patrick Burns'
Dominion
lawyer.
Democracy Suite version 5.5
Let me repeat
alpha.
that. Stephanie Lambert is Patrick Burns' lawyer, who's being sued
In the
by,
course
say it
of
all
your
together
work
now,
and training and
Dominion.
experience, have you had occasion to become familiar with something called FIPS 140-2?
Yes.
And how did you become familiar with that?
Well, FIPS 140-2 is required anytime a technology that's
Please,
going to be
bigger
utilized
shows.
by the
Please
federal
cover this,
government
please.
and contains security encryption.
I'm clearly trying and
functionality,
failing, so would you
it has to
fucking
be
do
FIPS
something?
compliant. And so our Cipher software,
Fuck.
we
Lindell
became
wasn't
very
just a
familiar with FIPS.
clown.
In the development of that software and our algorithms.
And so how would you characterize your level of familiarity with FIPS 140-2?
He was easy money to fund a really
I would say that
fucking
it is
intentional operation to
more
get
advanced than
access
the
to
average
machines.
security guy.
That's
I'm not a
no.
FIPS certification
He
expert,
sounds like him though,
but
doesn't
I'm
he? It's
certainly
not
aware of the
Trebuchet.
criteria.
All right,
It's
and
not
if you
the
would
guy
please
from
turn
Tina
to tab
Peters, but he
20
just looks like him. But I've seen his
and,
mug on like
tell the court
fucking
whether
Real
you
America's
recognize
Voice and bullshit like that.
the document marked exhibit number 20.
I'll find his little info.
Yes,
And what is
But
it?
please,
that is
please,
the
can we focus
FIPS,
on this?
Pub
Please?
140-2.
You don't even have to watch
Pub.
me.
Yeah, right at the very top. FIPS
not like
Pub
a-
Here.
means
English or
published.
Irish pub, right? It's a publication
Publication.
Yeah, you're
and
being
it's put
funny.
out by
You think this is funny?
whom?
By NIST.
Who are they?
They are the National Institute for Science and Technology,
Oh, I was thought
I
he would
believe
say
is what that stands for.
statistical trouble.
Standards and Technology.
Standards and Technology.
National Industry for
And got you guys on
statistical
acronyms
trouble.
today.
There you go.
Given your work in cybersecurity, are you familiar with something called encryption keys?
Yes, I am.
What are they?
Encryption keys are utilized from two aspects. One is to authenticate accesses to ensure that when a system or a user is actually accessing a system, that they are supposed to access it. And it's also used to encrypt and decrypt
It's time for
information
joint number
and
4.
protect that data from unauthorized disclosure.
Joint number 4. Is that a lot?
Now, are you
That's
familiar with
That's not a
the
There's no way that could be
industry standard protocols or
Really, it's
practices for the
3.5.
storage and management of encryption keys?
3.5.
I'm familiar with the requirements,
Wait,
yes.
no.
All right, sir.
What?
And are you also familiar with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission certification requirements as they relate to encryption keys?
Oh, let's
I
listen to
have
this.
reviewed them. I don't know that I would classify myself as an expert, but I am familiar with them.
Okay,
right.
and what are you going to say about them?
And does FIPS 140-2 address the topic of encryption keys?
Yes, it does.
And you're familiar with that?
Yes.
Have you had occasion to examine the election, well, you've answered this in part already, but have you had occasion to examine election databases in any Georgia counties that were used in the 2020 election?
Yes, I have.
Can you identify the counties that you've examined?
Yes. So Bibbs, Telfar, Appling,
This case is intended
Jones,
to sow doubt in machines
and
in
Coffee.
Georgia. That's
Right,
what
sir.
this is, just so you know. The
Have
performance
you
argument is
examined
that.
those databases with respect to the storage and management therein of encryption keys?
I have.
Have you examined or analyzed what could be done by a bad actor who had possession of the encryption keys for the election systems used in Georgia?
I have.
Do you mean like
Have you ever testified as an
Ron
expert
Watkins
before?
and that Corey
Yes, I have.
Surfer fuckwad
About
dude?
how many times?
I was first qualified as an expert in federal court in 2007.
Teresa, I need you.
And
We'll
between
meet halfway.
depositions and actual
Okay.
court
We'll meet
appearances,
halfway,
at least
or I'll come to.
4
It doesn't matter.
or 5 expert engagements per year after that.
Okay, since 2007,
Correct.
4 or 5 a year,
Yes.
right? Have you ever been excluded as an expert due to lack of training, skill, qualifications, or expertise?
No.
Have you ever testified as an expert regarding any aspect of the Georgia election systems or Dominion election systems?
Yes, I have.
And where have you done that?
Specifically in Arizona. I also have provided declarations in Michigan
Oh, listen, it's an affidavit,
on-
asshole.
on 3 separate occasions. I have provided declarations in support of Supreme Court appeals, reference Arizona as well.
And what aspects did your testimony cover in those instances?
Cybersecurity basics, the state of the systems, state of the databases, and the vulnerability aspects of the systems.
Have you ever testified regarding the encryption keys and how they're stored and managed in these systems?
By declaration and affidavit, yes.
And when was the first such declaration?
Well, the first time I was aware of these encryption keys issues was in March of 2021 as part of the Antrim lawsuit. I provided input to the declarations and affidavits at that time. And I also have provided declarations concerning these databases more recently in the Arizona case
In March of this year.
in March of this year.
And do you recall the first time you ever connected encryption keys to certification standards, if you ever did?
The first time I really was asked about that was in conjunction with this case. And that would have been about a month
so
and a half
really-
ago.
All right.
Never, until now.
Your Honor, at this point, I tender Mr. Cotton as an expert on cybersecurity in general, encryption keys and how they should be stored and managed and how they are actually stored and managed in the election systems used in Georgia.
Mr. Tyson?
It's what here, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Cotton. My name is Brian Tyson. I represent the Secretary in this case. I wanted to ask, I believe Mr. McDougald asked you about your testimony on the Georgia system, and you mentioned an Arizona case. Did you talk about the Georgia system in any of your testimony in the other states that you mentioned?
As part of my declarations, I have included the Georgia analysis in the analyzed systems from a holistic perspective.
But you had not offered opinions specific as to Georgia's election system in Arizona or Michigan or other states, right?
Only to the state of the correlation of widespread vulnerabilities across the Dominion systems.
And your first work in cybersecurity related to voting machines happened after the 2020 election, right?
That's correct.
And for your testimony today, you're relying on your review of the Coffee County EMS. Is that in part of your reliance?
In part, yes,
And you're also relying on the databases from the 4 counties that you referenced?
correct.
Have you reviewed any EMS files from any other Georgia county besides Coffee County?
Are you talking a forensics image of those devices, or are you talking just the databases?
A forensic image of those devices.
Only Coffee County.
Do you have access to any other counties, a forensic image of any other counties EMS in Georgia besides Coffee?
I do not. However, I would offer my services should the Secretary of State make those available.
Don't fucking touch anything, you stupid bitch.
Now, in part
gonna
of
share a
forming your
story about this.
opinions in this case, you relied on Dr. Holderman's report in the Curling case, right?
I
I'm so
reviewed his
tired of these
report.
people.
What I'm relying on is my own analysis and findings within the scope of this case.
So fair to say you
It might
reviewed
be
his
worth
report
it,
as part of
Lee.
your process,
It
but
might
you
be
did your
worth
own
it.
analysis of the systems. Is that a
I mean,
fair
it's a shit
statement?
show, but
That's
it's
correct.
important.
Now, you don't have any specialized knowledge regarding election administration, correct?
Only what I've gained as a experience since 2020 as part of these
As a
legal
fuckwad.
proceedings.
Yeah, no, Your
And
Honor.
you don't have any special training or knowledge about
No, he
Georgia's
doesn't.
system apart from what you've
True.
looked at with the Coffee County system and these 4 databases. Is that right?
Well, unfortunately, the ability to analyze those systems is strictly controlled, and some might say hidden, by the restrictions put in place in Georgia.
Okay, hold on.
So that would be a yes to my question then. You're relying on what you've looked at, those 5 items?
I am relying on what I have looked at as the basis of my examination.
Yeah,
And
I
are you
know.
being paid for your work in this case?
I am
And what is your hourly rate?
$350 an hour.
Whoa, you better talk
And
to
when were you
Clay.
first hired
I mean,
to
Clay,
work
you
on
better
this
talk to
case?
this dude.
I was first engaged for this matter probably the end of July. I was asked to take a look at it.
So, Your Honor, we would don't have a dispute of Mr. Cotton testifying about cybersecurity generally. Don't think he has a sufficient basis for specialized knowledge about the Georgia election system itself to testify as to the Georgia specific components of the Dominion system. So we'd object on that basis.
The system, including all aspects of it, not necessarily like to include the
I
encryption
haven't
keys
read
that are
this
the heart of
article
the
yet,
issue.
but I want
Yes,
to.
Your Honor, to include the
American
encryption
oversight.
key. I
This
think you can
looks like
speak
it
to
might have some
encryption key storage and
clues about
management
Stephanie
generally, but
Lambert, this
the
Cotton
scope, as I understood it,
motherfucker,
was
and other
specific to the
people.
Georgia election system, and we would object to that.
All right, but it's fair to say he's saying that he's just making extrapolations based on what he learned through Coffee County. Is
Who the
that
fuck is this guy?
Correct. I think that's right.
He's not
Yes.
an
All right,
expert
then
in
I'll note
elections,
the objection.
period. There's no
It's
conversation.
reserved for the record, but I'll overrule it. Mr. Cotton can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. On that point, did you examine the backup election
I'm so tired of the
databases from
lying.
Appling, Bibb, Jones, and Telfair?
I did.
And so your opinion is based not just on your examination of the Coffee County forensic image, but
There's
also
just
the
so
files,
much
the election,
lying.
backup election databases in the other 4 counties.
Correct.
So you've examined 5 Georgia counties.
Yes.
And have you examined any other Dominion systems anywhere else other than Georgia?
Yes.
And you've examined the databases in those systems as well?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Are encryption keys any part of the Dominion system used here in Georgia?
Yes, they are.
How are they used
How do you
in the system
know?
here?
How do you know?
So they are used to authenticate systems, establish trust
Why are
between
you
one system and
laughing?
another, authenticate the user activities on a trusted system. They are also used to protect the data. So for example, in a tabulator, when you scan the ballots, you are generating images of those ballots, and you are also generating a results file, .dvd, and you're generating
If I
a
missed anyone when I was
a
gone
cast vote
that
record
came in,
as part of
hello.
that. So those keys are utilized to, one, encrypt the DVD files, and any encrypted file that system utilizes, those specific encryption keys are used to encrypt that data. It's also used to facilitate the transmission or transport of that data, whether that be over a network or whether that be via a USB or SD card. Those encryption keys are critical to ensuring the integrity and the assurance of the voting process.
In light of how they are used, are they important to the security of the system?
They're vital. It might be noted that if one takes the time to examine the certification documents that are present on the public website at the EAC, there's actually a matrix there of risk mitigation strategies from different threats, and encryption of data and the securing of transmissions is used in almost every single one of those mitigation efforts. That shows you how important it is for those keys to the system.
If a bad actor with some skill has access to the system and can they get access to the encryption keys?
Yes.
And if they do that, if they're able to do that, how would you characterize the overall security of that system?
Well, in context of the voting system, they could completely manipulate and control both the reporting and the artifacts that are contained for some of the levels of the audits that are conducted by different states.
And how is it that access to the encryption keys would enable them to do something like that?
So,
I wish I never
simple
started
scenario.
following Lindell, ever.
Let's say, for example,
Ever.
that the
I hope
encryption
so.
keys or the
I hope so.
voting
Lee.
results
This is the
on the
plaintiff's
SD cards
case.
from the tabulators
So,
are
right?
being
Is that the right
transported
word? Yeah,
from the
plaintiffs.
precinct
Yeah, the state. The
to the
state's the
location
one.
of the EMS. If an insider or an unauthorized person could gain access to that
It's
SD
DeKalb
card
County
and had
GOP
access to
versus
the
Brian Kemp.
encryption keys, they could decrypt the results.
I'll get all the
change
background
the
on it. I really
results,
hadn't pulled it.
modify
so
the
I think
ballot
Oren
images
also
on that
tweeted some.
SD
find it,
card to
And
conform
I'll
with those
update the
change
description
results,
with all the links.
re-encrypt it, re-SHA hash it, and submit that to the EMS, and the EMS wouldn't know the difference. That's one scenario. Second scenario, if you're actually
How do you
transmitting
know?
data
How do you
via
know?
networked interface, they could
Oh,
do the
yeah.
same thing in what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack, leveraging the 509 keys
Looking for
and
the
those encryption keys
man
in
the
combination.
middle.
Up to do effectively the same
He's
thing that you just
over there
described
trying
with
to
correct.
steal my vote.
In light of their importance to system security, how should encryption keys be stored or managed on the system?
Well, they should certainly be
Well, certainly
protected
not
like
in
the
a
family
password
jewels.
book.
You know,
From
they
Etsy.
are a critical component of the
It says passwords on the
integrity and the surety of that election
front.
and the
Duh.
functioning of that system.
And is that
Although
topic
it was cute, Baldur's Gate.
covered in FIPS
That was
140-2?
It's key management principles.
And in a nutshell, can you describe for the court
Hey, I started
what
playing
FIPS
Fortnite. I'm really
140-2
bad at it.
requires with respect to the storage and management of encryption keys?
If they're contained outside
I'm
of the
basically
actual
just gonna
encryption
become like
module themselves, then they
hermit
must
who
also
plays
be
games.
protected and encrypted.
All right.
I'm going to live the
With
the
respect
youth I didn't
to
have.
Appling, Bibb, Coffee, Jones, and Telfair,
The 20s I
can
didn't
you
have.
describe what you examined?
Yes, so I was directed to a website, zebraduck.org, I believe is the name of that.
What?
Zebra, ZEBRADUCK.
And I have a
Org.
witness to explain that name.
Excuse me?
I will have to
Would
rely
you?
on other outside experts to explain the name.
Zebraduck.org?
I was directed to this website and it contained the responses from public records requests throughout the state of
Who
Georgia.
the fuck did that
Those
website?
4 counties were part of those
Who?
postings on
What?
that website.
Excuse me?
They were posted there in the form
I'm
of
afraid to
a
bring
zip
it up.
file, a 7-zip file. So it has .7z extension on it. I downloaded those files and extracted them. First thing I did was I looked for a verification hash for the databases. When I did not initially see that on the first download, we queried back to the organization that posted them, and they provided us another link to a site that they had the original files that were placed up there, and those did have the 7 zip file of the whole package and an
Don't
accompanying
fuck my
SHA
phone up.
value for those
Oh
files.
God, it's
So I
And-
downloaded those as well.
All right, and
Don't go there. Do not
did
open
you
that
do
website.
anything to
Do
determine
not.
if the files you examined were authentic?
Do not.
Yes, I did.
Do
Did
not.
that
Do
vary
not. Do not.
by county?
Don't do it.
The procedure
my
was the
God.
same. Obviously, the files that I checked were different. One has a name X and this one has a name Y. However, the first
I'm-
thing that I did was I created my own SHA value for the
This last couple weeks
7
has
zip
been
file
very
that was
illuminating.
related to each county. I then compared that SHA value to the SHA value that was posted by the Dominion system in conjunction with the production of this package.
And what did you find?
So on 3 of the counties, they matched perfectly. On one of
I
the
think
counties,
so.
which
I
was
mean,
Jones, there was a
I
mismatch.
backed all the way
And
out
so
of
I
it. Let
further
me just, like,
examined that particular
close everything.
mismatch
Yeah, I only have
and
one tab.
determined that at some point,
I don't know.
someone had
Oh.
mistakenly added
Don't
that
do it.
SHA value to the 7-zip package for the encryption, and that had changed the value. I further dug into that particular package specific to the database file in
Imagine how
in
easy
the
it
project
would have
package.
been for someone to use
.xml
AI
file
and drop a link
determined
that's a
that
virus, and
the
all
dates
the
and times
followers
of
of
the
that AI, of that
of that
person
file matched what
unwittingly
was produced with
turn over their
the
phone data. Sorry, I'm
Dominion
thinking
voting
about science
software.
fiction a lot these days.
Based on your
So,
examination,
kind of in
as you
that
have just
mode.
described it, with
Feels like
respect
real
to
life.
the backup databases in the 4 counties, do you have an opinion, a professional opinion, as an
And I
expert as
feel
to
like a
whether the files you
replicant.
examined are
Is that a
authentic?
bad thing? I don't
Yes,
think it's a
they
bad
are.
thing, right?
All right.
That's kind of what I feel like that's what my role
Now,
is. My trope
you
in the genre.
are you familiar with how the Dominion system works?
Or I don't know, maybe that's not right. Whatever it
Basically,
is
yes.
that just like the cheese stands
And how are
alone.
you familiar with it
you
to
know?
that extent?
Like
I've been
oh,
examining
well, she's a
these
nice
systems
girl,
since
but
2021. I've
you know what I
actually
mean?
created virtual machines of the forensics imaging that we have taken,
bitter.
and
No,
I
don't know.
have
I'm just
operated
kidding.
the systems in a virtual isolated environment.
All right, sir. Now,
I'm not.
can you characterize the fidelity of the backups to the operational databases on the machines?
Well, I can tell you that I have the unique opportunity to have a forensics image of Coffee County
Oh,
with that
really?
database in its
Really?
operational state.
Really?
And so I did examine the
Really?
Coffee County database. I
Did you?
compared the artifacts
Oh my God.
of that database
I
to
don't know
the
what to do anymore.
backup databases we received, and they are fundamentally the same construct, and they would represent the operational databases of those counties.
And does that provide a reliable factual basis for the opinions you have given
Yeah.
based on your analysis of those databases
I
and the encryption keys
malfunctioned. I
that
had a
are in?
malfunction on the recording.
Absolutely. If
So
it exists in that backup
it went
database
private. So I
at
don't
that
know
point in
what's
time where they
going on,
made
but-
that backup,
Oh well, that happens.
all of those,
Happens
all the
once in a
data
while.
in that backup existed in the operational database.
Now, you've mentioned Coffee County a couple of times, and you've
Why you
made
gotta
reference
join
to a
live.
forensic image. Would you please describe to the court how you came into possession of that forensic
I'm
image?
just kidding. I'm totally
So by
kidding.
direction of my attorney, I was given access to a download site from a firm called Sullivan Strickler. And Sullivan Strickler
Oh,
had been
Sullivan
engaged
Strickler.
by Coffee
Oh, it
County
might have been excessive fun.
or
That was
some
fun.
some
oh my
person
God. I didn't
to perform
laugh
a
so hard.
forensics preservation
Okay,
of
that's I
the
think Sydney
Coffee
Powell.
County EMS, ICC, a Dominion supplied laptop, and some poll pads.
Okay. And how, when you went on there and retrieved it, what did you retrieve?
So when I downloaded those files from the secure website, first thing I did was verify the images. And in this particular case, all of these images were in an EnCase image format, which I know well. It's a forensically preserved, a bit-for-bit copy of that device that was the target of that imaging operation. It is a self-verification mechanism as well. So when you verify a forensics image in EnCase, it will tell you if any bit of that data is changed or if it's deviated from the original hash value at the time of the imaging of that device.
And what did that software report to you about the Coffee County image that you examined?
They verified.
And in your field of work, cyber forensics, is the EnCase image through the method you've described considered to be self-authenticating?
Yes, not only self-authenticating, but it's the industry standard for admission into court.
And so in your expert opinion, both the Coffee
That's so
County
nice.
files you examined and the files from the other 4 counties are in fact authentic digital
We'll have to be
records
extra funny
of the
this
systems in
Saturday
those
then.
counties?
Yes.
I will, at this point, Your Honor, I'd renew my tender
I tried
on
to
the
change it
4
back. I can't do
counties,
it.
the
I don't know.
flash
It's some
drives.
kind of glitch.
I don't have a flash drive or EnCase image or anything like that for Coffee, but I would intend to ask him questions about Coffee, subject to the ruling of the court.
And I think that I'd already kind of conditionally admitted him.
Right.
So if there's any update from Mr. Tyson, I think we would proceed along those lines.
Your Honor, I think just waiting for a copy, but we don't have any objection to them.
All right, so if they're admitted, if they're authenticated, then we can dispense with my authentication witnesses, several of whom are outside. And we can release them from sequestration.
All right.
You can let them know they can come back, they can come on in. Thank you, Your Honor. What, if anything, did you do to check on the encryption keys in the election databases that you looked at in these 5 counties?
I got some
So the
code
first thing
speed
I did
10.
was to
I'm excited.
verify their existence. I knew which tables
I'm
they
excited
would
about my
reside
new
in.
vitamin supplement. I'm
I
really excited about it.
Navigated to that location of those tables and verified that those encryption keys were there. And I did that in each of the 5 counties.
And is it your opinion that the encryption keys that you found in the backup databases in the 4 counties are the same, in the same state or condition in terms of storage as they are in the operational databases for those counties?
Yes, the reason that you make a backup is so that you can immediately restore that backup copy to an operational state in the event that something goes bad with the EMS server during an election. So by definition, those encryption keys would have had to been the same as the encryption key state
All right,
in
sir.
the operational database.
Why? What?
And so when you looked at these 5 databases,
You can't assign
what did you
multiple
find
encryption keys to the same data?
in terms of how the encryption keys were stored?
In all 5 databases, those encryption keys were
Can you
stored
do that based on
in
sign-on? Like I know
unencrypted text, open
next
text.
to nothing about.
Was there any control on access to the encryption keys?
Not really. And the reason I say not really is because in the Coffee County EMS and in all other Dominion systems which I have examined, they are utilizing a user authentication to the database. So that means that if you are at the keyboard of the computer,
My
then
sign
you
on.
have access, full access to that database.
If it's part of your security
So,
profile.
the vulnerabilities for a Windows system are
Fairly
well known.
common.
The antivirus had not been updated since the
Oh, well.
Coffee County Dominion
Yeah.
suite had been installed in September of 2019. There's roughly 1 million new exploits released every day. And so when you do the math, you're talking about millions of additional vulnerabilities that that system would not have detected. There were no system patches applied. Once again, hundreds of vulnerabilities that were admitted by the operating system owner, Microsoft. They release a patch every
Really?
Thursday.
Oh, really?
So the fact that that hadn't been updated after
Really?
the
Oh my God.
installation of that Dominion
Oh,
software,
that's what fucked up my computer. Okay.
you know, is
No wonder.
you know, it's just basically an open
The
state.
patch.
You know, we've heard other experts say that it's just wide open, and it really is
Oh,
wide
stop.
open.
Oh my God. Why are we doing this? I'm so embarrassed for this
Um,
country. It is
Does
almost 4
what
years
you have
later.
described with respect to the storage and management of encryption keys on the election system in Georgia comply with FIPS 140-2 as a technical matter?
No,
Oh,
that a
sorry, you
close call?
guys. I'll
No.
try. I'll send an email to YouTube support. I'll see if I can figure it
This
out.
you may not know the answer, but does it comply with the voluntary voting systems guidelines
And I'll
as
just
a
object.
technical matter?
I'm just object in terms of lack of foundation. I don't think we've talked about VVSG with this.
Well,
this
you're
witness
right.
At all.
I take it back, if I can. Are you familiar with the voluntary voting systems guidelines provisions on security, cybersecurity?
I've reviewed them, yes.
Do you know enough about that to say
Which toilet were you
whether
sitting on when you reviewed them?
the management and storage of the encryption keys on the election systems in Georgia complies with the voluntary voting system guidelines? And
I
it's
would say
okay.
that they do not.
All right, sir. Have you examined any Dominion election systems in other jurisdictions outside of the state of Georgia?
I have.
What jurisdictions?
Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Colorado.
And on those systems, did you check on how the encryption keys were stored?
I did.
And what did you find?
I found they're stored in the same state, which is plain text,
Unencrypted.
unencrypted. And I might add that with those different analysis, it's not only that they're in the same storage state, but Georgia uses Democracy Suite 5.5 Alpha. Arizona used Democracy Suite 5.5 Bravo, and Colorado used Democracy Suite 5.10.
And so that's, those are subsequent updates of the system,
That's correct.
but they all had the same characteristic?
Yes.
As a matter of cybersecurity, how would you characterize that situation?
Well, it depends on how I'm looking at it. If I'm looking at it from a hacker's point of view, hallelujah. If I'm looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective, I can't believe that anybody would ever do this. You know, if you're talking about the criticality of the ensuring the integrity of the vote, which is the base for our
Delay and
democracy,
confusion.
then how could you ever leave?
No trust in the
unprotected.
machines.
So
That's the
it's-
goal.
I quite find it frankly appalling.
Fuck, me too, dude. Me too.
If a representative of the Secretary of State made the statement that Georgia's election system was the most secure in the world,
This is so overtly political.
what would be
It's
your opinion about
insane.
that statement?
Your Honor, I'll just
It's
object here in
absolute
terms of it's
fucking
about the election
insane.
system. He's not an expert on that. And I don't think there's any basis or foundation for him to have known every election system in the world to respond.
Okay, I'll withdraw the question.
All right.
Mr. Cotton, would you describe the Dominion system that you've examined in the 5 Georgia counties and in other jurisdictions around the country as the most secure computer election system in the world?
I would not.
Shocker.
Second place?
No.
Don't stop. Just
All
fucking
right.
stop. You made your point.
You had an opportunity sitting in the courtroom to observe the demonstration videos that Mr. Parikh played for the court. You recall that?
I do.
And can you give an opinion about the significance for cybersecurity purposes of what those demos show? And if you can do them one at a time, or you can do them in the aggregate.
So I, basically what it shows and demonstrates, and by the way, I have performed independently each and every one of those activities to ensure that they are accurate. So what I can tell you is that those are just 3 snippets of vulnerabilities and methodologies by which you can gain access and manipulate this system. Okay. But it does show a general lack of security within the voting system, specifically within the database. And that database is critical to recording and reporting the results of an election. I also have the advantage in this particular case to have access to the full forensic image of the Coffee County EMS. And so I took that one step further. I said, well, are those passwords present as the Windows user authentication passwords on any of these systems from Coffee County? And so I analyzed all of the passwords for the user accounts for the ICC, the Dominion Supplied Laptop, and the EMS. And the DVS Corp 08 exclamation point was present as the primary password for all of the accounts on the Coffee County
Yay,
adjudication
vacation
system.
for a day.
Yeah.
Oh, you mowed
So
the lawn.
now you
That's
not
so
only
cool.
have
More nonsense.
a vendor supplied password in the SQL database, but you've got a vendor supplied password
Untrusted systems.
for the only mediocre protection of the database. So basically, what is demonstrated here is a total lack of cybersecurity with respect to the Dominion EMS and the voting system.
All right, so that was the password video, if I recall correctly.
That is correct.
Showed us DVS Corp 08 exclamation point. The second one, do you recall what the second one was about?
The second one was the tabulator passwords. And those were encrypted passwords that are contained within the election definition file and also the election database.
And the encryption keys were used to decrypt those passwords?
Yes.
Is that method of password management compliant with cybersecurity standards as you understand them?
No.
What is the significance from a cybersecurity password of having
I'm already
common
worried about.
usernames and
Oh, God,
passwords for all the
yes.
users?
Well, there's a couple of very critical points here. One, you're using the same username for every single account on the tabulators, as well as on the Coffee
Mike
County
Lindell is the
EMS.
perfect
There's
distraction.
a standard list
Perfect.
of generic usernames
Bravo.
that are present on every single
You clowned so that
Dominion voting
everybody
system
could
that I
get what
have
they needed.
examined. Okay. If the passwords are all the same and the usernames are all the same, then there's no accountability as to who did what in the event that you do find something wrong. So you don't know who did it, right? Furthermore, over time, if someone, like in the case of an election worker is a volunteer in one election, they would have that same username configuration piece specifically for the databases for the next 10 years or until they changed them. So, that really broadens the extent to which someone can exploit these vulnerabilities, and there's no accountability for those.
All right, sir.
Yeah, that leaving those cameras on, Tina Peters, that would help you have some
So if I
security.
understand you correctly, username and password in Colorado is the same as it is in Bibb County, Georgia?
For the specific usernames in the SQL database, yes. Okay, for those 3 specific usernames. It's DVS
And-
Corp 08 exclamation point.
What
What I have
are we
found
doing
is
here?
that specific to the Windows login, you have the same list of usernames and then a shared password for all the different accesses to that Windows system. So what this means is that if you're trying to regulate what privileges
Wow.
a specific user has,
Yep.
so you want them here at the EMS user level,
Mm-hmm. Are we talking about
they
like
can use the very
admin
same
things that,
password
like,
to
would
simply
have
jump up to
be
the EMS
shared or
admin
something?
and
What are we
have full
talking about?
control over that system.
And so we heard testimony from Mr. Parikh that the DVS Corp 08 exclamation point password has been present on the system, identified as a vulnerability since no later than 2010.
I would submit that given the nature and the syntax of the password, probably since 2008.
How'd you characterize that as a cybersecurity matter?
Horrendous.
Um,
How'd you feel
in your
about it? How'd you
examination
feel about it when you heard? Did you cry?
of any of these Dominion systems, have you seen any indication of non-election personnel remotely accessing a Dominion system?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I too have reviewed a series of emails
Affidavits?
produced by Dominion in which they're discussing remoting into Gwinnett County, Georgia.
That's through software,
I
probably.
have also reviewed
right?
Depositions from
Depositions or affidavits? Choose your words
Coffee
carefully.
County,
Oh,
in
you better
which
choose
the
those
election
words more.
clerk specifically details how 2 Dominion employees fixed her voting system from the parking
Your Honor,
lot.
I'll just
Oh
object here. I think we're
my
in a triple
fucking
hearsay at this point
God.
at least.
And wrong.
Unless you've got an exception that comes to mind, Mr. McDougall, I think I would agree with that.
I don't think I can think of an exception, Your Honor.
All right, and that'll be sustained. Next question.
All right, sir.
You think you're funny?
Have you at
stupid
any
fuck?
point had any discussions with anyone from the Secretary of State's office about the encryption keys issue?
I have.
Can you tell the court about that, please?
In the Supreme Court affidavit, I had mentioned that I had analyzed a Bibb County database. And we immediately got a call from the Secretary of State's office and correspondence demanding to know how I got access to the Bibb County election system. My attorney that represented me at that, Mr. Kurt Olson, I handled those communications primarily, but we did have a Zoom conference. I can't, off the top of my head, recall every person who was there as part of that conference, but they were all representatives of the Secretary of State's office.
And what was the topic of discussion in that call?
They had misread the declaration and they had thought that I had access to the physical voting systems, that I had analyzed the physical voting systems, not just the database.
All right. And was there any discussion of the encryption keys or your findings and opinions on that topic?
With the call, no. However, the very fact that the only reason they were calling me was because I had called out the encryption keys in that
Wait,
declaration,
what?
they would have had knowledge of the issue.
Did they ask you any questions about the encryption keys vulnerability?
No.
Was there any discussion about what ought to be done to mitigate that risk?
No.
And when was that?
That would have been in
The
the
risk
July timeframe, I
classification
believe.
is his,
All right.
not fact,
Put a year on
based
that.
in fact.
24.
It's not based in any fact.
Okay. I am.
Actually, I take that back. It would have been 2 days after the submission of that document in support of the Supreme Court petition.
All right. And I'm going to ask you to turn to tab number 5.
And the suit, tie, shirt
Yes.
combo, stupid. Looks like a
And
really
that's a
bad
document marked
insurance
as
salesman.
Exhibit 5. Have you ever seen that before?
Yes, I have.
Now, this is an email thread, and to be fair, you are not shown as being a sender or receiver. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so how is it that you're familiar with the document?
I was shown this by the attorney.
All right, sir. And does this refresh your recollection of when approximately your conversation with the Secretary of State's office occurred?
Yes, this says Sunday, August 25th.
Well, let's go back down a little bit.
And the thread looks like it originates March 28th.
All right, and it's fair to say, or did the Secretary of State's office ever follow up with you to talk about what your findings were?
No. Once we had sent them the data on where we had obtained the backup file, that was the last I heard from the Secretary of State.
Yeah, because what the fuck else are they going to ask you about? Jesus.
Is compliance with FIPS 140-2 an ongoing obligation as you understand it?
Absolutely.
And I'll just object on the grounds that obligation to what and under what?
I'll rephrase the question, Your Honor. Is as a technical matter, cybersecurity technical matter, is compliance with FIPS 142, where it's applicable, an ongoing requirement that must be maintained?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it would be absolutely ludicrous to
Oh, that's a feeling.
require something for certification and then say that as soon as you buy the system, you can do whatever you want with it. You can delete the encryption keys, you can do whatever you want with it. It's just, that's nonsensical.
That's a feeling. I'm just going to start doing that.
Your Honor, I'm trying to skip things that have already been covered with Mr. Parikh, so give me just a second. I'm almost done.
Oh, baby, you're done. I'm about to stick a fork in you. You're so done. I can't remember what this lawyer's name is, but I recognize his voice. It's kind of like the poltergeist guy, but
You heard Mr. Parikh's
younger.
testimony on how X509
You know, I'm
certificates are
probably
used.
not corpse.
That's
not a
correct.
corpse.
Any disagreement with the way he expressed it?
I would actually expand on it just a little bit.
Okay.
So, the opportunity I've had to look at different systems across different states gives me a unique perspective of what that vulnerability could do. And so that 509 value is the same in every single Dominion system that I've looked at, regardless of version and regardless of
Every
jurisdiction.
single.
What that means is that if anyone with that certificate
Anyone.
can get access to the same network address space.
Right.
Then they can remotely establish trust with that voting system,
Through what software?
execute APIs, or
Through what
direct
software?
interaction with that system without
Prove it.
really needing to know the user password for the Windows system. Okay. So I use the term address space because each of the Dominion EMS systems comes with pre-configured tunneling protocols and capabilities.
What are those?
So a tunneling capability, think of it as a VPN. If you've ever used a VPN to log into your office or somewhere else, you simply connect to a VPN, and then you have the same IP address or the same
I don't know how this
IP
shit works.
address space as the network that you've VPN'd into.
I'm gonna
So
call
in the
bullshit
case
on some of
of,
the things that he's saying.
the typical home network, that'd be a 192.168.1.1. Oh, I'm sorry. A 192.168.1.x network or address space. And so you could join that network and be a member of that network through those tunneling protocols. That is very easy to do. We do know in many jurisdictions that the routers that are procured as part of the Dominion voting systems are what they call managed switches, which means that you can program access control lists, you can program routes, and you can establish tunnels to those routers. So, that
Really,
is
with just like, you know,
it's
hot
critical
stuff
that with that
at
509 key,
proton.me or whatever it is.
literally,
Is
if
that- I
they
can do
have
it
a
with that?
tunnel, anyone anywhere in the
I mean,
world that has
really?
access to
Anyone?
that address space
Why haven't they done
could
it then,
change
sir? Why haven't they done
the
it?
voting software, they could change the voting
Why haven't
results,
they
they could
done it?
change any aspect of that
Why
voting
haven't they
system
done
that they desired.
If they
Why
did
haven't
that,
they
would it
done
be
it?
detectable?
Not given the current logging levels and the artifacts that they
Yeah,
currently
they would never
log.
be vague.
So the only way
Not
that
about-
you would
not
detect that
testifying,
would be
certainly.
to analyze different
This is just
machine
a load of
address,
bullshit.
they call them MAC addresses, okay? And those addresses can be spoofed, but generally they're not. But if you had a PCAP capture, which is basically as you transmit data over a network, those are in
Want to
packets.
vomit.
And a PCAP is a packet capture. If you have recorded those packets as they transmitted the
No.
network,
No.
then you may be able to determine whether or
No.
not somebody had unauthorized remote access.
Oh, no,
Um,
no.
But given
you
the current
can't.
state of every
No,
system that
you
I've looked
cannot.
at, they simply do not record PCAP data, nor do they record the system process data that tells you exactly which processes were executed on the system. So the short answer is, at the current state, no, that would not be discoverable.
PCAPs don't show shit. Ask Mike Lindell. They looked at PCAPs and
Can
then told
Dominion
them at the
remotely
last minute,
access
"Dude,
these
your
systems
data's
without
stupid."
detection?
Based on the emails that I reviewed, yes.
I'll
Keep
object
screaming,
on
Orin.
that
It's all
basis
right. You can
that
go all
because
caps, babe.
we're
Whatever
relying
you
on
need.
hearsay for that. Those aren't before the court.
Emojis, caps. I don't care.
All right, if you want to
'Cause this is
expand on the basis
frustrating.
for his opinion on that.
What's
Mr.
the
Goody.
basis for your statement?
Dominion produced a number of emails in response to subpoenas. A number of those emails have been released
And
publicly
you
by
interpreted them.
a sheriff by the name of Dar Leaf.
Oh,
And contained
yeah.
within those emails are specific conversations about them remotely accessing voting
That's
systems
because you probably
during
have
the course of
remote.
an election.
Oh,
Well,
forget
apart
it.
from that,
I can't.
based on your understanding of the technical aspects of the systems, is that possible to
It is
remotely?
possible.
Remotely, okay.
Remote access software is different than remotely hacking into something. Can we agree with that? That many times vendors for software will be able to help and do a remote desktop?
We've heard reference to
Anybody?
air gapping. How would
Anybo-
you characterize
gapping.
the
We
level
should
of
have had a bingo
protection
card for
provided to
this.
the
I'm
Georgia
so
systems
sorry I
by
fucked up on
the
that.
Georgia version of air gapping?
Well, air gap is a technique, but it's an easily bypassed technique for protection.
Oh my God.
The US government has been bypassing air gap networks since the 70s. Okay. And the most
right,
common
everybody,
technique
get
to
your
bypass
tinfoil
that is
hats,
called island
okay?
hopping.
Get your
And
tinfoil hats
basically,
out because it's time.
We know that the EMS
Oh my God,
servers
these guys
typically
just
have a
discovered the
wireless
CIA
card
does bad things.
installed on the motherboard.
Oh,
Even though
well,
they claim
welcome
it's
to the
disabled,
party.
it's still there. If you
Yeah, and where have you been?
if you bring in a hockey puck with an unencrypted signal,
What?
typically default on a Wi-Fi is to connect to these unprotected Wi-Fis. So all it would take is somebody with their
What,
cell
like my
phone
grandma's phone?
in a hotspot mode, or bring in a little Verizon hockey puck, and you've once that EMS connects to it, or any of the other systems connects to
'Cause they're
that, you've
always looking,
bypassed the air
right?
gap network. It's very rudimentary. If you've got an actual active insider threat, it's child's play.
Okay, listen.
If you
I'm going to tell you
have
right now,
somebody
this
who's
is
inept
Lindell's
in
thing. He wants to,
configuring
that's what he wants to
systems,
send into polling places
happens all
is
the
the
time.
way to tell there's a
so
there's
it is
way to
a
hack the
technique
machines in
for
those polling places.
protecting, but it can't
This
be
is a
the
Lindell fucking
technique
operation.
because it's so easily bypassed.
All right, sir.
God, I'm
And
so tired of talking about this.
so if we assume that
Nobody
the
ever
system
listens.
is vulnerable because of the encryption keys and the passwords, and the X509 certificates, as we've discussed, are the physical security measures that are supplemental to
That's them,
electronic
Cause of America is
cybersecurity, are they sufficient
managing
to
that little
protect the system?
project.
And I'll object, Your Honor, on the grounds. I don't think there's foundation for Mr. Cotton's knowledge of the physical security measures that Mr. McDougal's question is referencing.
Well, I would say as a general matter, as a cybersecurity
Tom,
professional,
for becoming a member.
can you rely on physical
Al,
security
thank you so
procedures
much.
in place of adequate protection of encryption keys and passwords?
And same objection. I believe we're talking about a specific set of physical security processes in Georgia that we haven't established he has knowledge of.
All right, so yeah, Mr.
Oh,
McDougal, if you can
Verizon
tie it a
network
little
is
more
down.
closer to
Solar
Georgia
flares? I
practice
don't
and
know, what do we
procedures, I'd
have?
also say I think we've already covered this ground fairly adequately. And so I'd be wanting to know what additional
Okay.
insight he might offer here.
So as a general matter, are you familiar with the concept of physical security in the cybersecurity world?
Yes, and in the course of my
It's a physical security
support to
inside a cyber
election
security
litigation, I have
world.
visited various
Judge's
election
board.
offices, shall we speak, although I have not visited Coffee County.
Oh, you just
But
stole their
it's
data?
important to remember that the people who run our elections are not cybersecurity experts like
No,
myself
but they're
and Clay.
election experts,
In
and
most
they
cases,
really follow some
these
pretty
EMS
strong
servers that I have
ethics.
viewed
Unlike you,
are
I
simply
know.
running in the clerk's office. So while you may call it an air gap system, there's a question as to physical access on
I
these
think it's good to
systems.
take a step
If
when
they're
things
simply
start to
exposed
happen.
in a
Just
clerk's
take a
office
beat.
and they're there
You know,
24/7.
It's like, let's understand.
As a cybersecurity
'Cause it's
professional,
gonna get weird, and every
would
day
you
it's
be
gonna be
willing
multiple
to
weird.
rely on
I'm just gonna
physical
say that.
security measures as the primary defense of your system, where it was as vulnerable as the Dominion system is, as we've
And tonight
discussed?
we're having a
Your Honor,
space
same
at 5
objection in
p.m.
terms of
PT.
Georgia
So
specific. We're
come over
again
to the
assuming a lot
shitter
without a foundation.
and join us
I'm
at
asking
5
as a
just to
general
laugh
matter.
a little bit.
All right, well, I'll give you some leeway, Mr. McDougal. I think, again, we're getting a little astray of the core of your petition,
All right.
but we'll see where it goes.
No, he's trying to overturn
Certainly
the 2020
physical security
election.
would be an
Stop it.
aspect of it, but I would heavily focus on what happens when that first layer of defense breaks down, right? So if your defense on a system is strictly one layer and that breaks down, then you really have no layers. We had a saying in the military that one is none, two is one. So in this particular case, if you're solely relying on physical
What?
security to
One
ensure
is
the
none, two is
protection of
ton?
those encryption
One is
keys,
bun, two is
then
none? What?
that's really not security at all.
So do you have familiarity with the physical security procedures in Georgia election processes?
I have been informed by the clerk from Coffee
Well, we
County
call that
what her
hearsay.
procedures were. I am not familiar with the total statewide standard operating procedures.
All right, sir. Now, in the, there was testimony earlier that there are lots of different vulnerabilities for the election system. Can you assign a rank to the encryption keys and password vulnerabilities and X509 vulnerabilities that we've been discussing relative to the other known vulnerabilities? Can you rank it?
Well, in some ways, there are different classifications of vulnerability. So most of the
I thought Max
vulnerabilities
is
that we have
okay.
talked
I mean,
about
just because
are
I miss
really
her.
vulnerabilities
we're
to
missing
grant
Max.
access
I'm missing a bunch of people.
to those systems that contain the unsecure keys. Okay. So the relationship between those two different
but Kathy, that's
categories
such good news.
is if you've got a vulnerability over here for access, then you've got the full vulnerability for the encryption keys in effect. I would say that if you're going to rank this, I agree with Mr. Farik's assessment that
Yeah, we're not
um,
surprised.
the average home computer is better protected from a cybersecurity perspective than
That's not true.
the EMSs that I have examined.
That is absolutely not
And I'll
true.
take this kind of
man
one
is
step
lying.
further. If I'm going to do an analogy between
Oh,
these
fucking
vulnerabilities,
hell. Here we go.
you've
Strap in,
taken
kids.
a AES 256 encryption key, which is a very, very secure encryption technology, and you've neutered it. Okay. So if I put this into an analogy with banks, if you've got a bank vault, and that's the latest and greatest lock on that bank vault, and you tout that security on that bank vault, what they've done here is the equivalent of writing in big bold letters the combination on
Stop
the wall
it.
next to the lock.
Oh, stop it. Well,
Okay.
then why
So there really
haven't
is
people,
no security if you can get
why
access
haven't
either
why
remotely
hasn't it
or physical
happened?
access to those
If
systems.
it's like
And
fucking
as a incident
grandma
response professional,
putting her password out there, why?
would mitigating that be a high priority?
Absolutely.
What
many
mitigation
home
measures
computers
could
has
be
he
taken in
examined?
the way of transparency to help mitigate this that wouldn't be overly burdensome to the counties or the state?
Your Honor, I'll just object here. I think overly burdensome to counties in the state assumes a level of knowledge this witness has not, there's no foundation for that. And I think this is very speculative
he
even
does
for an
not
expert on
have.
what he could offer.
Your Honor.
Right. I think
All right, let me ask it
You
this way.
think you know that? Well, guess what? I don't
I'm just
think
saying
you do,
that.
so
I'll
I
say
think we need
sustain
to
on those
tell your
grounds.
ass.
All right, sir.
Rephrase.
Fucker.
Would it be difficult to order the election officials to produce system logs, cast vote records, and ballot images shortly after the election?
No, it would not.
Would that affect the user experience at all?
No, it would not. And furthermore, I would say that if you're really going to protect and mitigate during the time frame while they're fixing the database encryption issues, you would
I
also
like his little
want to
infinity thing behind him, though. That's pretty cool.
enable PCAP captures of the network space so that you could definitively prove that nobody else remotely accessed those systems. And enable what's known as syslog logging of the actual processes and operating system to determine what programs and processes were ran during the course of that election. And both of those are very
Russia
simple
appreciates this
technologies
information.
and
Makes
are
so
not
much
burdensome
easier,
at all
right?
to implement.
Just cut out middleman, go
Thank you, sir.
straight to election, straight to ballot box. We have a bot farm for that.
Unless there's any immediate need for a quick break, I'd like to try and see if we can power through it. All right, Mr. Tyson.
Thank you, Ryan. I don't expect to take as long, but Mr. Cotton. Good to see you again, Mr. Cotton. Let me start with Coffee County, because you reviewed data from Coffee County, the forensic images you described, right?
Yes,
And were you aware of the data collection happening in Coffee County before it occurred?
no, I was not.
And do you recall when you first were hired to review Coffee County's EMS and equipment?
That would have been the end of May, first part of June of 21.
And I believe you indicated you worked with Stephanie Lambert. Is that right?
That's correct.
And it was your understanding
Hello.
that
Thank you,
Misty
Carrie.
Hampton,
Thank you.
the then elections director in Coffee County, was a client of Miss Lambert's. Is that right?
Yes,
Here's Stephanie.
You
know who
referenced a
else?
firm called
Patrick.
Sullivan Strickler that you used, that you utilized to download those images. Do you know who Sullivan Strickler's client was in the Coffee County collection?
I do not.
Sydney Powell.
And you've been involved in imaging election equipment in states other than Georgia, right?
Correct.
And that includes voting equipment in Michigan.
Yes.
Was that
With
also
Stephanie?
working with Miss
Yeah.
Lambert?
Yes, and part of that was also with Matt DePerno.
Ooh, ooh,
Matt DePerno, I believe it's spelled
P-E-R-N-O.
DEPERNO.
Yeah. We know him. We know him.
You
He made
indicated
that
you
little-
conducted a
whistle.
forensic examination of the Coffee County images. What do you mean by that term?
So forensics means I applied standard investigative practices that are technically accurate and repeatable. The term forensics means that you're gearing this towards admissibility into a legal environment. And so it must be able to be replicated and must be authenticated.
In your review of the Coffee County images, you didn't find any malware, did you?
I did not find malware.
Did you find any evidence of manipulation of votes on those systems?
To the extent that I've looked at this point, no.
And earlier, when you referenced you had spoken with the clerk in Coffee County, were you referring to Miss Hampton?
Yes,
And so you've spoken with her about her work in the Coffee County Elections Office?
yes,
And you're aware that Miss Hampton and others were criminally indicted related to allowing access to the Coffee County equipment,
Yeah,
right?
did you know that?
I read about that in the newspaper, yes.
Oh, really? Just the newspaper?
And I believe you said you've never been to
Just the
Coffee County.
newspaper.
Is that right?
Okay.
No.
Really, no. Interesting.
Let me ask you about some of the analysis you
All over
performed.
Chicago.
You described some different ways that people could access systems. And one of the things you described was a similar pattern, I believe, of vulnerabilities in Dominion equipment
Yes.
in states other than Georgia. Is that right?
lies.
Yes,
And so I guess a way to think about this is it's not unique to Georgia to have these encryption keys stored the way they are. From your knowledge, every state that uses Dominion equipment has the exact same vulnerability, right?
yes,
And so when you said Georgia's system, in your view, is not safe and secure, you'd agree that that applied to other states using Dominion equipment as well, right?
I would.
Okay, keep going.
In terms of access to a system, you described some ways where if somebody had access, they could undertake various steps. Do you know or have you reviewed in Georgia the rules surrounding the storage and maintenance of voting equipment?
I have not.
So you don't know exactly what someone would need to do to gain access to the Dominion equipment in Georgia, right?
Well, I mean, basic
Yep.
storage is basic
That's
storage,
right.
right? So if you have it secured, it's locked up somewhere in a closet, somebody has a control key. However, Dominion systems have to be maintained. You can't let the batteries go down on the tabulators. You've got to keep them plugged in. You've got to keep them energized. So someone has to maintain them. So there is continual access during that time period in which they're stored. To the extent of who has access, I do not know. But from a basic principle perspective, if you secure something, people have access, they perform maintenance throughout the year.
You talked with Mr. McDougall about air gapping. You'd agree, though, air gapping is a security technique of some sort, right?
Yes.
And you discussed a scenario where someone could bring in a hockey puck to connect to Wi-Fi, various things like that. Has that ever occurred in any Georgia election, to your knowledge?
So here's what I will tell you is
yes or
I
no?
have, as a course of my examination of Coffee County, that system was connected to the internet.
Stop it.
Now, whether
Stop
that was through a
it.
hockey puck
Stop
or
it.
another routing mechanism, I simply haven't been able to determine what that is. But the artifacts on the system itself mean that it was connected to the internet.
And when you say connected to the internet,
That's not
are you
true.
finding artifacts of network connectivity or specifically internet connectivity?
Internet connectivity,
Yeah, check the
for example, I believe it's mail.live.com, where somebody checked their mail.
And was that on the EMS server or on another
Really?
component?
Where
That was on
was
the EMS
that? Oh my
server.
God.
And do you know if that connection of the EMS server to the internet would be a violation of any Georgia law or regulation?
I would assume that it would be,
Oh, you know what happens when you do
given
that?
what I know about the Georgia law.
You talked with Mr. McDougall about different risk mitigation strategies that are on the EAC website. Do you recall that?
I do.
And you'd agree that states may select different risk mitigation strategies based on things that are unique to those states, right?
Yes, however, at a certain point, there has to be a little bit of
Which
common
point?
sense involved in that
Oh,
risk
really? Which point does
analysis.
common sense kick in?
Right. So if
That
you're
sounds like a
saying
feeling.
that I'm going to assume a wide open barn door
I'm going to call that a
because
feeling.
I really like the looks
That's
of
a
the
feeling.
lock when it's open, then obviously that's a failure of the analysis and the risk mitigation strategy.
So that's how you're saying people decide how it's aesthetically pleasing? What the fuck?
Now, from your
Who is
review,
this
you'd agree
clown?
that the encryption keys for each of the databases that you reviewed, while they're stored in plain
God.
text, were different for each county, right?
They were.
And as part of your analysis in this case, you've never reviewed the process Georgia uses to build election project files, right?
My understanding, that's controlled by the state. And that in itself may be a weakness from a security standpoint, because you have one office who is now constructing all of the project files, thus defining all of the passwords for every single county in Georgia. So there's a single point there where all of that information is in one point. So the fact that that is performed at state level in one location is actually a weakness rather than a strength.
Do you agree that it's better than having a vendor perform that function of building balance?
I think that would depend probably on who at the state is doing it, and I don't know who's doing it. If you have the janitor doing it, then I wouldn't say that. But typically, I would agree
Well, I
with
would
the
certainly
statement
hope no one is.
that if you have
You fuck-
competent
the
people
weave.
at the
He's
state
doing the
level
weave.
performing these functions that are government employees, then that gives a larger fiduciary responsibility and assurance to the process.
And you haven't reviewed the process Georgia uses to
Fiduciary?
deliver election project
What?
files from the state to counties, right?
What?
No,
What does fiduciary have to do with this? Does he even know
In
what
response
that
to some
word
questions from
means?
Mr. McDougall, you propose some other changes you think need to be made to the Dominion system,
Outta here.
PCAP captures, I believe, various things like that. Do you have any knowledge of whether making changes like that to the Dominion system would alter its current EAC certified status?
well, the beauty
that
of
have to
those
do with
changes
systems?
would be, like for a PCAP capture, that would not involve the Dominion systems at all. That would simply be what's termed a tap off of the switch in a promiscuous mode, so that it would record all of that traffic. So there would be no impact to the certification status of Dominion at that particular point. The syslog enabling function is a setting in the registry. It would require a repository to be established external from
I just need this
the
for a minute.
voting systems themselves, because you don't want to
I do. I
put
need to
the
smoke a joint.
copies of the logs on the same place where you
Everybody
cop
else,
the
do what you
logs
need to do to
from.
soothe. Just don't take care of
That
yourself.
should not
Don't be dangerous.
affect the certification status. But I find that argument a little bit interesting.
Oh, I thought it was more around financials.
Because on one hand, you're saying you can't do a simple configuration change because it may affect the certification. But on the other hand, in my certification or in my analysis of the Coffee County voting system, there is a compiler on that system, and they have developed, modified, or created over 3,000 program executable files or device drivers on that system, and that did not affect the certification, apparently, of that system. So in my case, in my view of that, it's you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You either allow changes within certain constraints or you don't. And in this case, changing a registry setting, making a configuration to take the logs off of those individual systems and centrally store those for future analysis is minor compared to creating program files, creating DLL files, which can actually change and modify the behavior of the system.
So it's your belief that having those compilers is an additional vulnerability, but it's not something related to EAC certification. Is that right?
So
Hey,
EAC
Peace
certification requires a static program listing as it relates to the voting system. Okay. I'm going to leave legal opinions to the attorneys in this room. But what I will tell you is it's once again nonsensical to certify a system.
That's a feeling.
And actually, the
That's a
Secretary
feeling.
of State's office called for essentially an audit after the 2020 election, in which they hired Pro V&V to come in and certify that nothing changed on those systems, and at the same time have program files and DLL files that were modified and created related to Dominion Democracy Vote software paths, over 3,000 of
Oren.
them. So, in my opinion, if you change or if you add a program file or a device driver that's related to the voting software, that should decertify the system.
So to make sure I'm clear on my question then, you believe that the existence of compilers should result in a loss of EA certification, but to your knowledge, the Dominion 5.5A system remains EAC certified. Is that right?
So my opinion is that if you use those compilers to create new executable files or to
I'll bring
create
the
new or
dinosaur suit to
modify
the
the
California
device
bar.
drivers
We
of
could
those
go tell
program
him
files,
if you want.
that should relate in or result in a decertification of the system. Okay. Now, the problem is nobody checks. Okay. I know that when Pro V&V came
That's
into
a
Georgia,
feeling.
they said no file had
Nobody
been changed.
checks ever.
But they didn't check the entire directory paths
No one
of the
ever.
Dominion voting system.
How do you know? How do you know?
He gave an example of a bank vault and writing the combination and putting it on the door of the vaults. Do you recall that?
I do.
You'd agree that even if a bank undertook that, having locked doors on the outside of the building and having guards or staff present would at least provide an additional layer of security, right?
Well, it would provide an additional layer. Now, how effective that is, obviously the question. And, if I relate to an old show, and I'm dating myself here, if you've got somebody guarding it, his name's Barney Fife, and
Oh
he's
my
got one
God.
bullet and he's asleep in the
No,
car,
you're the Barney
then
Fife.
that's really not
Okay,
protection.
dude.
But it
You're
is
the
a
Barney
technique.
Fife in this scenario.
And You've obviously looked at some components of the Georgia election system.
And you're not even a
Do
good
you have any
Don,
evidence
Don
that anyone
Knotts.
has
He
ever
was actually a
manipulated
talented
votes in
actor.
a Georgia election using any of the
You're not even
vulnerabilities
funny.
that you've described in your testimony?
The challenge is you're not recording the right items
No,
or
wasn't he
enough
from
of the ones that you
Massachusetts?
do record to
No
make
way.
that determination.
So that would be you do not have evidence, correct?
Well, just as I would
That's a
argue
yes or no.
that you can't definitively prove that they didn't. There simply is no proof there because you don't have the necessary elements to analyze to determine
Well, then
whether
how
or
do
not
you know, you stupid motherfucker?
prove or disprove that something happened.
So for
Then
whatever
how do
reason, you don't have whatever
know?
tools you feel you need
God.
to have.
I
It's
love
still
Mr.
true that you don't
Limpet.
have
It's
any
one of my
evidence of the
favorite movies of all
manipulation of
time,
votes cast in a
Butterflies.
Georgia election, right?
Based on the forensics evidence, if you have no evidence or no artifacts to look at, then you're right.
Mr. Cotton, do you believe that Georgians can never know for sure whether Joe Biden won the 2020 election in Georgia?
You know, look, I
No,
served my
come on.
country for
Go balls
21
deep.
years,
We appreciate that. Thank you.
and I abide by the law of the land, and he is our
Fuck yourself.
certified president. Okay, this is not about rehashing
Oh,
the 2020 election.
you motherfucker.
This is about restoring the confidence and
Fuck you.
faith
So you're saying
of
that there's no
all
confidence.
Americans in the foundation of our democracy, which is
this.
the voting process. And if we can't prove or demonstrate to them that this process is
Nothing
secure
even happened. We already proved it in a court of law. We
and
proved it in
that
a bunch
we
of
can
courts of law.
detect
Let me
if
tell you
there's
about the
something
courts of law
going
we
on,
proved it in.
then I
Motherfucker,
think that
John
what
Eastman.
we
Why don't you
saw
ask John Eastman about this, you stupid
subsequent to the
motherfucker? Why don't you
2020
ask Sidney
election
Powell, who had
is
to
going
quit because of the
to
machines,
continue
motherfucker?
forward
Oh,
in
in
the next
Coffee
foreseeable
County.
future with whoever lost
I can't.
bringing these up as issues
Shut
for the general public.
up.
And so I really look at this as more
Shut
of a confidence
up.
issue and making sure that we as a collective government
You
are
aren't
doing the
doing
steps that we
shit.
need to do to ensure the integrity of these
He's on
elections.
a so
Is it your testimony that if no
dumb.
changes are
Hey,
made to the
Jack, this is
Dominion
dumb.
system from how it's currently configured, that Georgia voters cannot trust the results of the 2024 election that'll be happening in November here?
Well, I'll go you one further. I mean, you know, there's obviously going to be
You know
doubt
what? Do
if
it,
no
bitch.
if no steps are taken to address the vulnerabilities and the integrity issues that are readily knowledgeable in the public, then there's going to be doubt. Okay.
What?
But I will go you
Why?
one step further. In those emails that I have reviewed,
What?
the Dominion programmers
Tell us.
themselves stated,
And I'll just object here to hearsay, Your Honor, for any further testimony on that. If I could have a moment, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Cotton. Thank you.
You redirect on those points.
Oh my
Just a couple,
God.
Your Honor. You mentioned the executable files.
yes,
Were those placed on the system, or were you able to tell whether those were placed on the system before or after certification?
they were placed on the system after
Oh.
EAC certification and after the installation and implementation
Oh,
of the
Orrin,
Dominion
I'm
software
so sorry.
on the Coffee County EMS.
Oh, I definitely hope you get the help you
And
need
does
to
that
resolve that.
raise any questions in your mind about whether the certification is still valid for that particular system?
Huge questions,
Agreed.
huge questions.
Now, you mentioned a
Agreed.
compiler. What does a compiler do?
So, you know, as experts, we are often accused of speaking
You're
very
not an
technically and
Yes,
above people's knowledge levels, right?
and you are guilty as charged.
No,
I am guilty.
he's not. I
So a
understood everything
compiler
and I'm an
does the
idiot.
same thing for a computer, okay? So a computer only understands one language, zeros and ones, bits and bytes, okay? Now, as humans,
Nibs and nubs.
we like
you
to
know,
program
bits
in
and
programming
things,
languages.
Nicks and knacks and bits
okay?
and
And it can
bobs
be
and
C++,
things.
it can be Cobalt, it can be Fortran, it can be, you know, Net++, you know, tick, 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 tick. What a compiler does is takes that human written code and turns it into machine executable language so that the machine knows how to interpret it and run appropriately.
Whiskey River,
Is
take my
that compiler
mind.
a necessary component of the ordinary functioning of the election system?
Well, here's what I will say. If the Dominion software requires
Oh, the Valor thing?
changes to a program for an election cycle or requires the development of a new device driver, then that clearly would be outside of what the scope of the certification examination was in the EAC. Now, whether it's required or not, that would be an EAC and a Dominion question, okay? Why do we have over 3,000 program files and device dynamic link libraries, which are device drivers, that were created or modified after you installed the software? Okay, and they all appeared to emanate from the Net++
And they did it at her birthday party.
msbuild.exe compiler.
Which was also installed after the original installation.
Here we
No,
go.
that was
I
installed
hope you guys don't
before.
want to hear the rest of this.
So what's changed, so it appears that the Net++
I'll go behind him.
msbuild.exe was installed as part, or that it was part of the golden image that was utilized to install the Dominion software
Yeah.
when it was
Where?
created, when they
Where?
created the EMS. But what's different
Like what?
is that it
What?
was actually used. And it actually created over 3,000 executable files
What?
and .dll files
Right.
after the fact.
Okay.
That were not part
Like
of the
ran
system at
reports?
certification.
Correct.
Like ran reports? Would you say it's like running reports? Because what does it execute? An EXE and a
Can
DLL?
the
Who the fuck
compiler
cares?
be used by a bad actor?
Tell me more, bitch.
You have access to the machine.
But you
you have
don't have
access to the
access to the
compiler.
machine, you stupid cunt.
And what possibilities does that
He
open
is
up?
one of the stupid experts.
Well,
Val.
I spoke a little bit
Cotton.
about
He's,
the
he's Stephanie Lambert's.
OPM
His,
breach.
his lawyer is Kurt Olson.
In
He's
that
part of
particular
Michigan
case,
too. He's part of all of this.
the piece of malware was actually a dynamic link library file, a DLL file,
Yeah, we know.
that was masquerading as a McAfee antivirus
How dare
driver.
you past them?
And that created the entire
Those are goofy.
access to the
Goofy
system,
working at
the
Dominion
exfiltration
again.
path. It created the entire vulnerability
No, I give
for that
up. I
system.
give up. I've been
So
telling people about
when-
these people for years.
When you're talking about
I know
malware,
I
you're
probably
talking
didn't
about
tell a
unauthorized
story very
access,
well, but hell,
unauthorized
you
exfiltration,
got the point.
those types of things. The creation of specific DLL files or executable files
Yeah, this could
is
have been an
quite
email.
common, which is why they should not be there.
There's a whole lot of
after the
feelings in the room
certification
today,
piece.
Gal, by these guys. They're just talking, they're testifying to
Right,
their
sir,
feelings.
that's all I
Weird.
have. Thank you.
Can you recross?
That was the
Just
redirect.
One question, Your Honor. Mr. Cotton, just so I think we're all clear on this point, but it is your understanding that Dominion 5.5A is certified by the Election Assistance Commission, right?
I've seen the certification certificate.
So it
Great.
is.
That's
Yes.
yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, can this one be excused?
I need
Mr.
somebody
McDougal?
really exciting next.
Yes, you may, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You can step down.
I need like
Any further
I need
witnesses or
Patrick
evidence,
Byrne.
Mr. McDougal?
Subject to delivering the flash drives on the demos? No, and with that, I think I've tendered everything that we've identified and intended to put in, and they've been ruled on, so we would rest at this point, Your Honor.
All right, so finding that the applicant's case in chief is closed for now at this point, what I would say, Mr. Tyson, or how soon do you think you can get a copy of those flash drives to him, either remotely or physically?
Well, this evening electronically, tomorrow physically.
Okay, do you have a preference? Do you need them both, or just is remotely fine for you?
Remotely is fine.
All right, if any of you could just let us know in the next day or two, Mr. Tyson, if you've got them, if you have any further concerns with those exhibits. And then, should Mr. Tyson, I think we're going to call that a day for now. And should we reconvene? Did the secretary anticipate presenting any evidence of their own or any witnesses?
Possibly, but before we do that, we'd like to both renew our motion to dismiss and
Right.
also make a motion for a directed verdict.
Right. And I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
I just kind of want to scope it out. If you say just generally kind of what that would look like, if you have a proffer generally of what that testimony would be, and just to kind of complete
Yeah, they were
the
minced.
the
They were
roadmap for
minced.
today.
It wasn't a
So, Your Honor, I
flashback.
think if we end up putting on evidence, it would be probably a single witness from the secretary's office just to speak about some of the internal processes for just, I know we had some different answers in terms of ballot building, delivery of information to counties, those types of things. I believe the SEB rules can be decided as law. I don't need testimony on those. So I think that would be the substance of what we'd be looking for a witness from the secretary's office. So not very long.
Sure. Is there anything as it relates to encryption keys or their current status that you think would come in through that witness?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, Ms. Young, based on what you have heard in the case in chief,
I like sprouts.
is there anything that you think needs updating in your arguments or that you want to highlight that what you learned today?
Well, in terms of a directed verdict, I'd kind of like to address why the evidence that you just heard is not sufficient to state a claim for mandamus. And I can do that this afternoon or,
I think we got a little time here. So,
sure.
I guess mainly what I was saying is obviously I'll incorporate all your arguments from the motion for the motion to dismiss. I'm more just curious what now you would have in addition to that. That's more so what I was trying to press on.
What? So a couple of things to say, if I can take the podium. You know, I want to start from a big picture standpoint, because, you know, we've heard a lot of testimony about the flaws that the petitioner's experts believe are in the system. And even if you take all of that as true, and even if you don't hear testimony that we might put on about the guardrails that are put around the system that keep some of the parade of horribles ideas from
It's the
happening.
DeKalb County GOP versus
They look at
Raffensperger about
300
using Dominion
and they
machines.
say, well, that can't mean what
That's what it is.
it seems what they think it says. You know, it can't simply be, you know, go buy a system that's certified and certify the system, and you don't have to
I'm going to
do
update the
anything else
description
ever
of this
again.
video with all of the links and
they're
some
kind of right,
background
they're
on
kind
this.
of wrong. That is what it says.
That'll
but
be done later
It
this
doesn't say
afternoon.
that in a vacuum. And if you look at, there's a
They want
great
to sow
law
distrust in the
review
machines,
article
period. That's the only purpose of this
at
lawsuit.
36 Georgia State University Law Review, page 86. I'm sorry, 81. 81. And it kind of goes through the history of HB 316, of which 21-2300 was a part. And, you know, the use of the BMDs at that time were very hotly debated. Sorry? BMDs.
It is.
And while we didn't hear this exact argument about encryption keys, there were arguments made against the use of the system. And the law review article kind of goes through, you know, the objections to that. And what came out of that was, okay, you know, the majority wanted to have a BMD system, but they said, we're going to do certain things. You're going to buy a system that's certified. And then after that purchase, you're going to have risk limiting audits and logic and accuracy testing. So when you look at 300, it's a starter statute. You know, it tells the secretary, go buy a system that's certified. Then you look at it and you certify it yourself. And then from there, other statutes kick in terms of who's going to do what. You've got, you know, if you go through the entire election code, lots and lots of statutes. that talk about what happens after that. You have statutes that tell the county superintendents that they need to make storage plans and they need to appoint a person that's going to be in charge of making sure the storage is safe. You've got this whole very detailed description of the counties doing logic and accuracy testing before elections, and then a process for risk limiting audits after the elections. From that point forward, most of the responsibilities are placed on the county. The SEB is told to go, promulgate rules for recounts, and they narrowed the threshold for the recount by 0.5% to make it a little easier for somebody to meet that recount threshold. And so when you look at HB 316 and our election code as a whole, it makes sense that the secretary's obligations under 21-2300 did stop at that point because that's when other things kicked in. In terms of what we've heard today, we've heard a lot of things criticizing, whether or not this system should have been certified or should still be certified. The reality is it's certified. It's still certified. And under 21-2300, what the secretary was to do was to purchase a certified system, which he did, and then certify the safety of that system, which he did. What should happen today could be a matter of debate. Should the EAC change its rules? Should they do something? Those are interesting points to debate, but that's not a proper case for mandamus. You also heard Mr. Cotton or Dr. Cotton, I can't remember, admit that the EAC certification is static. That was a very clear admission that, he acknowledged that certification is static. Now, they have raised, lots of arguments about why maybe it shouldn't be or whatever, but EAC isn't here. They're not a party to the case. We've also heard about physical security not being enough. Well, the legislature thought that it was. And the people responsible for ensuring that, some of these things that we heard about, election workers not properly watching their spaces, those election superintendents aren't here either. And those are their duties under the code. So when you look at mandamus, nothing that we have heard here today points to a clear legal duty placed on the secretary that has been breached. In terms of laches, you heard testimony that people have been aware of this issue for quite some time, depending on which witness you're talking to, but even, the plaintiffs.
Isn't it really only one witness that matters, though? And
Never
that'd be
heard about
I'm
that.
sorry?
Ms. McCarthy. Wouldn't it really only be one witness that matters on that issue, though? And it's the
True,
knowledge of
but,
the applicant.
and she testified that she's a, cybersecurity expert and that she read the Halderman report when it came out. And the standard for, what puts you on notice of bringing a claim isn't, having an aha moment. It's having some knowledge that there's an issue and picking up your duty to investigate further. If you look at the cases that talk about factors of laches,
That's a good point.
the ones that apply here are, you start with how long is the delay, and then you look at what's the
I could see
excuse for
that
the
being good.
delay. And, you heard these experts say they began working on declarations months ago without having a plaintiff, apparently. Apparently it was just a matter of time until they found one. But, between there not being a really good excuse for that delay and then the final factor being what's the prejudice? The prejudice is we're starting early voting in about 2 weeks. This is not the time to be reevaluating the state's entire system. The legislature had a very clear plan with
their
HB
point.
316, and they thought a
Needed to
lot
delay
about
before
the
election.
steps.
They needed
in
this
that
story hitting
plan.
now.
And the secretary did the things the legislature told him to do. The county elections workers picked up the ball from there, and that from that point forward, it was a group effort between the secretary and the elections workers to
Can
do
I-
all of these
is
things
it?
that the legislature sat down and sort of
What does the woman use in
brainstormed out
Poltergeist?
to try to
Petroleum jelly,
help
rope, and a
find a
towel or
brand new
something?
system for our state, and then take it from there to make sure it was securely stored, maintained, and properly
Sometimes
checked
Aldi's has those crazy
before and after
finds.
every election. There's just simply no cause of action stated for mandamus, and so we think, even with what you've heard here today, directed verdict would be appropriate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. McDougal.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
McDouchebag, that's right. I forgot about him.
So the fundamental legal question, I think, presented by the motion to dismiss and the motion for directed verdict is whether there is a duty to have of an ongoing compliance with the certification requirements. They say there isn't, we say there is. And we rely primarily on 21-2-300 subsections A2 and A3. And their argument relies on a very narrow reading of the language in A3 that it shall be certified by the EAC prior to purchase, lease, or acquisition. And we've checked that box, and that's all we have to do. But that interpretation does not square with subsection A2, which requires that the secretary certify it as safe and practicable for use. Now, that certification by the
Northern
secretary,
California.
it is made
Oh,
prior
there
to
might be
purchase.
one down here.
That's
Not very many,
that's
though.
relevant to the statutory analysis. But what is the purpose?
And I don't know where it is.
What is the purpose of that certification?
And I don't know
What
if
is
it's
the
in the
purpose of the
OC.
EAC certification? For the machines
Oh,
and the cases
you're in a
they're in? Why do they do
beautiful part
all of those
of
things? Why
SoCal.
have any
I
physical
would
security
imagine then.
procedures in an
I really
election? Why
love,
have any chain of
I
custody
love Orange
procedures in
County. It's so
elections?
pretty.
The entire structure of the election code in Georgia and the regulations that the Secretary of the State Election Board has promulgated is to promote election integrity and give the public faith and confidence in the result and have an auditable trail so that people can trust the outcome. So this is important. I mean, Mr. Cotton talked about this. We're evolving into a situation of zero trust in the elections. There was a big discord in our country over the 2016 election
What?
and whether it was hacked by the
No,
Russians.
it wasn't. That
There
wasn't
was
even
huge
the point.
discord in our country
Oh my
over the
God.
2020
It wasn't
election.
hacked, you
And
stupid
people
fuck.
are losing faith and confidence, and that
Oh, well, that's
creates
a feeling.
a fragile
That's a feeling.
situation. And
That's
we
a
need a
feeling.
stable situation.
That's a
We
feeling.
need, in a zero trust environment,
That's
we
a
have to
feeling.
have verifiable
That's a feeling.
steps
That's a
and
feeling.
documentation and
That's a
proof
feeling.
so that it doesn't
That's a feeling.
require trust.
That's a
It can
feeling.
be verified
That's a feeling.
independently.
That's a
Have
feeling.
it requires auditability.
That's a
Your
feeling.
interpretation of the statute, the certification, this is
Yeah.
not, this isn't a one-time deal. That's your interpretation of this.
Right.
Is that this is a,
Ongoing requirement.
and how often and
I'm eating
and
hot
something that can be
tamales for
revisited at
breakfast.
any point.
Don't
So-
judge me.
The secretary could uncertify at any point,
There
according
is-
to the statute.
Yes, there is a provision, and I can't recall the code section, but I'll get it to the court. I'll file a supplemental brief, that permits a petition to be filed with the secretary. It's
Mind your
either
P's and
competing
Q's in here.
vendors or a certain
isn't,
number
the
of
usual
electors. I
neighborhood.
think the number is 17 electors.
So
And
you
they can
say,
petition
but
for
don't push
the
it.
secretary to revisit the question of certification. So that's a specific way to invoke a duty to re-examine the question. But in this case, we have the Haldeman report, which documents the encryption key vulnerability and many other vulnerabilities being delivered to the secretary in July of 21. Wasn't made public until June of 23. I think earlier I said July, and apparently that was wrong. So what has the Secretary of State done in response to that? Nothing.
I don't know, Tom. Where? Where is that?
In March of this year, the Parikh, the Cotton affidavit, in another case, apparently came to the Secretary's attention. And they reached out through the Secretary's General Counsel to inquire about that. And that affidavit was made available to the Secretary's General Counsel. And the gist of that affidavit is very close to the affidavit that
an
that
affidavit?
we submitted from him as an attachment to our application and to the testimony you heard from
Did
Mr. Cotton
you,
and Mr. Parikh. So
how'd
the
that go when
entire
you wiped your ass with
problem
it?
was laid before the Secretary in, I think, late March of this year. And what did the Secretary do? He did nothing. And
That's
so
a
we are here
feeling
asking for
that is
mandamus relief to
lacking
compel the Secretary to
context.
do what
Well,
he
I don't
will
think
not
it's
do
that's
himself.
Tom. I wouldn't say that.
And
I take exception. My mom's from the
so
South. My dad was from the
interpretation
South.
of the statute,
It has nothing to
we
do.
say it
Education
would be
systems everywhere
absurd
struggle.
to interpret it
I
as
don't
the,
think people are
as the
dumber in
Secretary's
one part of
counsel
the country than they are in
urges,
another.
because then it would be nothing
But
more than
so I want to be
security
careful
theater.
about that because
It
people
would
can get really
create the
sensitive. But
illusion of
anyway,
security,
yeah, I
not
think
the
the lack of
reality of
education
security.
has messed up
And we
things.
cannot impute to the legislature
Certainly,
the intent to
this
simply
guy knows what he's
create
doing. He's a
illusions.
fucking slime bag.
They
That's
wanted to
different.
create the reality of election security,
Stupid, I can
as
forgive.
illustrated by the entire
Evil, I will not.
body of law in the election code regulating very, very minutely the procedures for carrying out elections.
Retroactive birth
The-
control. I don't know. I just feel
The
like
Secretary,
that's somewhat the natural mix of things.
his own
Selfishness
self,
and selfish and
took the position in the purchase contract
not, I guess. I don't know.
with Dominion that the system must maintain compliance. So which is it?
Yeah, I could see
Are
school
they
systems
supposed to
being
maintain
really, really super
compliance as the
different.
contract
Yeah,
provides?
that I could see, Tom.
Or is it
Thank you for that.
in the rearview mirror and it doesn't matter?
What? He needs 5 stars? Yeah. Well,
So
no, I'm just
the
kidding. I always give
Mandamus
good
code
reviews.
sections, 9-6-20, provides that, and in our brief, I quoted this language and I said it was 9-6-21. I was wrong. It's 9-6-20. It says that there's
Seems
a
to be lucrative.
mandamus provides a remedy for improper performance.
And
Well,
on highlighting improper performance.
Yeah.
I think the most common application is we see is do something, not that, you've done it wrong.
Right.
Any particular cases stand out where
The
the Supreme Court said you did it wrong instead of do something?
Not on the remedy of compelling due performance. So that language is in 9-6-20, remedy for improper performance and
Right.
compel due performance. So we think that it's a mandatory duty that the system comply with the EAC certifications and that responsibility.
And I'm not just saying, not
falls-
just confined to the
Yeah.
world of election law, just are there any mandamus cases that you came across where they said, yes, that performance was improper and here's the court stepping in to say that it was improper? Or are they all just kind of mostly the complete absence of any action?
Well, the other statute,
What's the case?
9-6-21,
No,
it does
stay
say
on that one,
that
bitch.
there's a remedy for the, normally it lies only for ministerial duties.
He asked you for case
But it's
law.
also black letter law that mandamus will lie for discretionary duties if there's been an abuse of discretion. And so if it's not construed as a mandatory duty, which we think it is because it either complies with certification or it doesn't.
Well,
You know,
that's
and
is
as we
that
sit
your
here
job?
today, it does not.
How do you know?
And, does
How
would the
do you
secretary
know? You don't
today,
know.
in light of this
I think I have
evidence,
to cut my hair.
certify this
Hair's
system
getting
safe and practicable for use?
Messy.
I hope not.
What?
I attribute to the secretary good intentions to have
Oh
a
my
secure system.
God, I
But
really
it's
love
baffling
this.
that they have
Good
not
shit.
reacted to the compelling evidence
Well,
that's been
that's not
put
what's
in his
baffling.
hands for 3 years about this problem.
That's not what's baffling.
So mandamus, that's the remedy.
What do you think
It's
it is,
available
bitch?
to us and we are resorting to it. So the abuse of discretion, let me put it this way. He doesn't have discretion to field a system that has open text encryption keys
Thank you,
that
Tom.
moderately
Thanks,
sophisticated
Gary.
attacker could exploit to
watched it
alter
last
election
night.
results without detection.
It'll look
He doesn't
even.
have
It
that
should look better
discretion.
tomorrow because it's always like the
Where's the
second day.
statute
It
that
looks a
says
little
that?
more like has a little more.
And they get there, that's the
Thank you.
effect of the argument. They get there by saying, well, all we got to do is have
Took a long time for
pre-purchase
it to grow back
certification, then
after I had some
it doesn't
surgery in
matter anymore.
2019. So
Uh,
I'm pretty.
It does matter. It has to matter.
Took a long
The
time.
only context in which it
I
could
feel for
matter
people
is
with
the
hair
operational
loss.
context.
It's hard.
The whole
It's hard to
point
go through.
is to have a safe election, not to pass a test. And why did the legislature require the test? So they would have a safe system in elections. I mean, it's nonsense to construe this as there being no duty to have a compliant and safe operational
Sir,
election system.
That's a real
That's the
feeling.
thrust
That's a
of the
feeling.
entire thing.
Oh, is it? Then your case is based
So-
on a big fat fucking feeling?
Okay.
All right.
I think I have not read that law review article, but I will
Excuse me?
go out on a limb and say that an
Uh-oh.
overwhelming concern was election integrity. The commission that was convened by the secretary was called the Safe Commission. It wasn't the Unsafe Commission, it was the Safe Commission. Why? Because they wanted a safe system. And if those people had known that these encryption keys were in plain text, that you had hard-coded
this is
vendor
it,
passwords
babes.
going back
This is
to
it.
2008 or
Perry
2010.
fucking Mason right there.
That you had 10-year X509
Oh.
certificates that could establish trust between communicating machines. They wouldn't have gotten off the ground. Now, we have an argument that's been made that
Sorry.
I will paraphrase by saying there's so many different security problems on this system that it doesn't really matter that the encryption keys are in plain text. He did not say that. I'm characterizing it. But the line of
is this a closing
cross-examination
sta- oh,
was,
it
well,
is a
there are a
close-
lot of problems here, and this is just one of them. And why should we focus on this one compared to the other ones? And the reason is because it is an extreme vulnerability, and it's been proven in this courtroom that they can be exploited to decrypt passwords
It hasn't been
with
proven at all.
administrative privileges.
It hasn't been proven.
It's been proven in this courtroom
No, it
that they
hasn't.
can be used to alter election results. Those
No,
are
it hasn't.
critical,
Oh my
critical
fucking God.
vulnerabilities, and they're
Stop
not being
lying.
addressed. And I'm sad to say that the Secretary of State's office is resisting doing anything to correct them. There was another sort of
Oh, thank you,
insinuation.
Tom.
Well, it's the same all over the place. Well, that's like the everybody does it defense. We're talking questions, does it comply with the statute? Yes or no? And it doesn't matter what everybody else does. It either complies or it doesn't. And it does not comply, and there's no evidence that it complies.
You're cheating hard.
Latches. The actual test
Well,
is gross
tell
latches.
you.
No illumination was provided on the subject of gross latches.
Mm-hmm.
The earliest that Ms. McCarthy reads the Alderman report back in 23.
Be
That is,
careful. Take a rest.
June of
Oh, I love
23.
laundry sinks. Oh, is it one of those big?
We're talking
like,
14
I
months.
love laundry sinks.
Latches can be sometimes analyzed in comparison to applicable statutes of limitation. It's not in every context, but that is one way to sort of figure out where you are in the world of sleeping on your claims. There's no particular statute of limitations on this. The public and the plaintiff were entitled to assume that the secretary would perform his duty. And I've cited this in the brief, but it's the case about the recording the lease. So, you knew in 2003. Well, and I was at pains to point out we got encryption key vulnerability is one part of it. The certification aspect of that problem is the other. And it's fair to say that Halderman talked about encryption keys vulnerability in July 21. He did not talk about certification. He did not put it in the context of certification. That report was such a hot potato, it was put under seal.
Hot potato.
went up to CISA, which is the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency. And it's all, so they got security in there twice. Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency.
This is a small
And
one?
they took
Oh, 99%
about,
plastic.
well, Mr. Tyson would know better than me, but I'm going to say approximately a year to review that. They issued a bulletin recommending
There we go.
mitigating measures, adaptations.
Oh,
There
here
were
we go.
8
I
of
can
them.
do
They
this.
didn't
I remember it
mention
now.
encryption
Here we
keys
go.
at all.
Fuck it.
And the secretary from 2001 forward has not taken any action to mitigate the encryption keys problem. But the latches argument presumes that Ms. McCarthy should have known more and better than they did once she read it in 2023 and come immediately to court. That's inverted. They're the ones that have the affirmative legal duty. And she's entitled to rely on them performing their affirmative legal duties correctly. It does not fall on her. And so I think that's inverted, and I think they have unclean hands charging her for with latches. And in terms, there's no evidence of gross latches, no evidence that she laid around and, tried to spring it on them. The issue was presented by Mr. Olson to the Secretary's General Counsel back in March of this year, and still they did nothing. We have asked for relief in the form of an order to compel them to bring the system in compliance with the certification requirements. They did not make the argument that that was impossible or infeasible for 2024. That argument has not been made. Maybe they'll make it in their case if we get there. But they have not made that argument.
That's my song.
But what if it is? What if it is?
For McDouchebag.
Well, is that the
Lawyer
same thing true
McDouchebag,
for
that's what
future
I'm gonna call
elections
him.
after that? 25?
God, I love
26,
laundry
28?
sinks. Oh, really? God, I love laundry sinks.
I should think not.
Nice.
And if it is, presents a practical problem for them to bring these systems in compliance in time for 2024, we've asked for what we call in the complaint interim and mitigating relief in the form of transparency measures. And I would say, to be fair about it, that our
My little
witnesses
boy.
describe some additional things
Sing to you?
that
You want me
could
to
or
sing
should
to
be
you?
done that we didn't identify in our pleading.
Let's see a piece.
Um,
Let's see if we can bring
And
the cats up.
all of that would be good, not just what we asked for in the pleading, but specifically the things that
Get
Mr. Cotton described. Those are not big burdens on election officials. The system, we got PCAP devices. Those are not part of the Dominion system. That's not maintained by Dominion. But the logging can be, they can change what gets logged. They can produce system logs. That's maintained normally. They can produce ballot images. Those are part of the process. And they can produce the cast
Wanna
vote
come up here?
record. Those are all already there. Just give them to us. That will be, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to solve the problem entirely.
What?
But it
Oh, that's
will
not it.
mitigate
No.
the problem that we have. That's
Oh,
an
there it
urgent
is.
problem that needs
There
to
we
be
go.
addressed and needs to be fixed.
There we go.
And the fact that if those
Ah.
mitigation measures
You
are
saw my whole signage and all my
applied,
pile.
it will serve as
I
a
have a
deterrent
pile.
because a bad actor
Outdoor
will
gardening.
know
Oh, nice.
that more scrutiny is being applied.
I have a list too.
And that will have a beneficial effect. And these transparency measures will bring additional confidence to the public. Why did we bring this case? Because we want this problem fixed. And if the secretary had fixed it himself, we wouldn't have had to file it.
I'm
All right.
terrible.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Stewart.
Judge.
I'm a
May I
terrible
just
Just a
mama.
minute.
briefly
All right.
word just on that last point about remedies. We've had both shifting legal theories. They started saying it was ministerial and now they're saying it's discretionary, but of course abuse of discretion. But what I haven't heard is a really cogent and clear expression of what the remedy should be. He says, well, you should just order them to bring it into compliance.
I'll just take it. I think there's a quite a few things laid out in the petition. So that's what I'm using as my
Cat butt.
Well,
kind of point of
s-
reference.
So, I'd like to ask before you enter any kind of an order to consider what would actually mean, because I'm certainly not sure what that would mean in 2 weeks. What is it that they're asking the secretary to actually do? Is it fix the system or throw out the system?
And I see these more, Ms. Young, as those, that'd be a discussion we'd have if they get past your directed verdict. So,
Well,
I mean, I don't see that as kind of.
But it does wrap into the directed verdict analysis, because if you can't simply order somebody to do their duty under a statute, then it's not a proper mandamus case. I will remind you that in terms of relief post-election, we do have a fully litigated case pending in the Northern District, which kind of tells you that there are adequate legal remedies out there, where many of these issues may end up being decided in that forum. But if the suggestion is that the secretary should just, simply order the counties to toss out all the machines, that would be a violation of a number of legal duties that expressly were placed upon the secretary and the county election superintendents by the legislature. The remedy, I think, really illustrates why mandamus is not the right place for us to be right now. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Young. All right, so I know I'd initially indicated that we would reconvene Wednesday, but I think kind of in light of some of the other things that Ms. Young has brought up and some of the other cases that are active this week, I think her presence and attention will be needed elsewhere. And so also just with our own conflicts here on this docket, I don't think we'd be able to come back this week. So I think next week would be the earliest. Recognize kind of the time sensitive nature of the decision here. So my intention is to have a decision for you on the directed verdict by the end of the week, which I'll just file by written order on the docket. And depending on the results of that, if we need to come back and reschedule something, I'll start working logistics with the parties from there. I think that's all I've got.
Monday.
On scheduling,
Yes, sir.
and I confess I do not have a leave of absence filed in this case, but I'm going to Europe between the 10th and the 23rd
Well,
with my
too
wife.
fucking bad.
We'll just reconvene in Paris. All right.
And they do have Zoom from there.
Understood. Well, we can work
Yeah,
that
well,
out through.
bitch,
Yeah.
you're going to be up in the
Anything else
middle
we
of the
need to
night,
have
so
today?
get ready.
No, other than thank you very
Don't
much.
be too drunk. What are we doing? Oh, are they ending? Okay. What is that? It is that what they're doing? Yeah, just go directly to Moscow. Holy poop buckets! Oh man, I don't know. I think it's over actually. I think they're just doing their thing. I'll leave it on just in case they aren't. Wow, it's going to be a directed verdict. Yeah. Yeah, you mean he wasn't drunk right now? No, I'm not. I don't actually guarantee that. I don't actually guarantee that. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. I don't think they're going to say anything more than we need. Well, let's just put up good old. Where's Garland Favorito? Where is he? Oh, yeah, I had him somewhere, but now I don't have him. That's okay. Well, isn't that interesting? I can honestly say I didn't think after following those guys for that long, I actually thought they wouldn't get anywhere. I really did. I actually thought they wouldn't get anywhere. I didn't think they'd get anywhere. I certainly didn't think they'd get this far. Oops. All right, mister. Anyway, there's a cat cam for you. Wow. I don't know, kids. I don't know. I feel like I scream into the void in so many ways, and then it's going to be one of those things where, hey, yeah, remember when Lolo used to talk about that? When she wasn't a hermit living on an island? Remember that? Who was that girl? Lady, Granny. Where is that hermit these days? Boy, it's just been a lot of crap, you know? You go through a lot of crap. And then you get to this point, and then you see everything that you see. And then you watch things like this, where stuff you screamed about for so long, and it's not because I screamed about it. I'm not saying that. I know very little. There are people that know so much more about the fuckery than I do. It's not even funny. I'm just here to laugh about it. I want to go to an island. Let's go to an island. So it's just frustrating, you know? And it's like we pay attention to all this incredibly stupid stuff. Incredibly stupid people, incredibly stupid stuff. And that's what we pay attention to. But these guys can go unfettered all across the country and fuck around without ever finding out. No planners of J6 are in, but oh my God, everybody, every last schmo. Which if you broke the law, you need to face the consequences, period. But you know who else needs to face the consequences? The planners. Follow me. Follow Jim Stewartson. Follow 5GW Hot Takes. Follow J Rants. Follow Clayberg. Follow Tina. Follow Teresa Carter. These are stories that a lot of people, not even just people I love, but all the people, there's so many people that have been saying, like Dave Troy and others, like, hello, this is a problem. We got a problem over here. People keep lying. And all those lies are continuing to get more and more oxygen. And nobody's stopping them. Or at least offering another, oh, that's my hand. Isn't that funny? Another version. So what? What are we doing here? All right. Anyway. Today I hung up my Michael Myers life-size curtain because it's almost Halloween. There's his beautiful face. Yes, I am going to put the list of all the links we went over, and I'm going to find some of the source documents for this particular case, like the docket, and I'll link those in the description as well. So I really hope that within a couple of hours, everything, by the time the space goes, everything should be updated in that. Yeah, so anyway, tonight, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, everything inside and outside of that. Trump J6 evidence drops tomorrow. There's Max. I was talking about you. Were your ears ringing? Happy Halloween. Yeah, it's October. So, you know, 'tis the season. And the people to follow. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie. Of course, that's what you meant. Forgive me. I will definitely put those handles in the description. Yeah. More words adds to more confusion. That's right. Peace, love. It's all about a shell game. And the debates tomorrow. That's right. Oh, my God. We got a lot of time today. Oh, no problem, Max. You were just missed. So there you go. I just want you to know that. Tonight, 5 p.m. Pacific, the Twitter space. Tomorrow morning, same time, we'll go through... well, I know there's more happening. I just don't remember what it is. Bye, butterflies. And then tomorrow night, we're going to do the debate. Oh, tomorrow I'll put out the bingo cards, too, for tomorrow night's debate. And it's not all nude. I just put that on the thumbnail to get people to come to the broadcast. It's called marketing, damn it. All right. Okay. I love you guys. Take care. Have a great day. Stick with the real ones. All right. That's all I got to say. Love you. Bye. Me and my new boyfriend say bye.